Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Get this chat set up. Hopefully you can hear me. What's up, chat? Volume good? Testing, testing. Hope everyone had a great day. Figured we look into giants tonight, something different. People said they wanted to do that last night, a lot of people. So I figured we'd go look at some giant footage. We're going to look at one of our first stories we're going to look at is the story of the Kandahar giant. Do any of you guys know about the Kandahar giant? Kandahar giant is a wild story. And our military apparently ran into a giant in Afghanistan. And that's what this first story is going to be about. Hopefully the volume's good. If you can't hear me when it starts playing, let me know. I'll try and work on something to make it better. Hey, right. I remember Jay Gonzalez.
Cargo ate the meat off the bones and tossed the bones. Chase didn't see enough human bones in front of him. Cargo lights turned red, indicating that the C-17 military aircraft had just entered Afghanistan airspace. 32 minutes later, the aircraft descended into a steep landing approach. The pilots wanted to get out of the air as quickly as possible without crashing, so they didn't become a Taliban target. During the mid-1980s, Russian invasion, the CIA supplied Stinger missiles to the Afghan fighters to shoot down Russian planes. These same weapons were used to take down U.S. aircrafts. One passenger, Chase, a CIA special ops agent, was not old enough to remember the Russian invasion, but he'd heard enough stories from the older agents to know it was a modern-day disaster and another great loss for the agency. As the plane's landing gear lowered, the seasoned soldiers leaned away from the windows to avoid a sniper's bullet. The new arrivals followed without having to be ordered. Chase had been here enough to know, it is the pilots the snipers wanted. The ramp opened immediately after the plane landed. All the men that piled out onto the tarmac would be going with Chase the very next morning and into the Kandahar mountain system. That evening, the camp commander, Major Campbell, gave a briefing about the next day's mission. 1 week ago, an Army infantry unit, while on patrol, went into the Kandahar mountains and vanished. Prior to their disappearance, there was no communication and no tick, short for troops in contact. Before daybreak, a C-47 Chinook will be dropping you off, in the same location the missing infantry was known to be. Lieutenant Murray, and Clark, you do not need to know his last name. I'm not sure he even has a last name.
Good evening, Tom.
Will lead you into the area where we believe the troops would have been. We suspect that the Taliban most likely killed them. It is your mission to retrieve the bodies, any weapons and equipment, and call in a chopper for retrieval. The CO asked Chase if he had anything to add. The agent shook his head no. I advise all of you go to the mess hall and eat all the carbs you can. They will be better for your stamina than meat. The major advised, I'll see you when you get back. The men felt some reassurance that the major was confident they were coming back. Morning came quickly. The 8 men were already off and in the air. After a 40-minute ride, the Army Ranger offloaded, not knowing if this would be an ambush. At once their training kicked in and they assumed defensive positions with their weapons pointing in every direction. After a moment of calm, where every man heard himself breathing, there was no enemy fire. The lieutenant motioned for 2 men to move forward and take point. They tactfully advanced in the direction of the mountain. then stopped to take up a position of suppressing fire. One of the men signaled an all clear, and the lieutenant sent 2 more men forward to overtake the first men's position. This type of maneuver continued until all 8 men were against base of the mountain without incident. Just ahead is what looked like a wide animal path, maybe even a goat trail. The lieutenant motioned for his point men to recon the top of the trail. Just around the corner, they found debris, torn and bloody uniforms, broken and shattered equipment and weapons laid scattered everywhere. The lieutenant and Chase crouched behind a large boulder, and it didn't take long before one of the men that took point to come back around the side of the trail so his team could see him. He gave a hand signal for the lieutenant to join them. Chase at once rushed up the trail without waiting for the lieutenant. Chase was not in the same shape as the Army Rangers, so at the top of the trail where the 2 recon soldiers waited, out of breath, he dropped to the dirt and unsuccessfully fumbled for his canteen. Without looking back, one of the Rangers offered Chase his canteen. Chase took it and gave him a winded thanks. After a brief discussion, the lieutenant signaled the rest of the men to join them. At the top of the trail was a rocky outcrop, a rock shelf, with 3 cave openings. There was no safe place to take cover, so 2 men stayed on the trail, with the other 6 soldiers, including Chase, and sought a covered position just off the trail and onto the mountain slope of fallen rock. Lieutenant Murray nodded for Corporal Mason, one of the men still on the trail, to investigate the cave's entrance. As Mason rose from his lowered position, a giant spear with a stone tip launched from the darkness of the center cave opening and pierced through the body of Corporal Mason and into the rock wall behind him. The men waited for the lieutenant's order to fire. Lieutenant Murray, so shocked at what he saw, froze. Then, from the center cave, appeared a 12 to 15 foot tall giant with long red hair on his shoulders and red beard. The monster of a man had to lean down to exit the cave opening. Immediately all 7 of the remaining men were overcome by the foul stench of wretched rotten flesh. Without any hesitation, the giant ran directly towards the fallen man to retrieve his spear. The second man on the trail didn't wait for the lieutenant's order to fire. He opened up, and as he did so his entire squad opened fire on the red-haired giant dressed in animal skins. As fast as Corporal Mason died, so did the giant. The giant's body was riddled with bullet holes and his head was partially missing on the left side from a 50mm round.
That'll
2
do
men
it.
dead, one a decorated Army Ranger, the other a giant from ancient stories told by old Afghan men around a night fire. The soldiers rushed to the corporal's body. The radio man called for an evac. Chase, the CIA agent, called for another chopper to take away the giant. He climbed up to the rocky outcrop to get a better look at the creature. The giant's blood was red, much darker than the creature's hair. Chase was the only one not shocked at what they discovered. He knew what they were going to find. This wasn't the first time men were reported missing because of a giant red-headed man monster. On the ground, outside the 3 caves, were bones, lots of bones. Human bones and animal bones mixed together, one on top of the other. He began to worry that there might be a female or even child nearby. The smell of death was so strong, Clark almost retched. Flies were swarming the cave opening. It looked like the monster ate the meat off the bones and tossed the bones. Chase didn't see enough human bones in front of the cave openings to account for all the lost men. There must be more inside. Maybe people caged for later meals or even hanging from the ceiling being bled out. Chase shined his flashlight into the cave and across the ceiling. This wasn't a government issue flashlight. This was a 1 million lumens he purchased from the internet himself. The light illuminated the entire inside of the cave. In his other hand, he held his semi-automatic .45. The cave floor was carpeted with more bones and a stronger odor, the smell of death that had always been with him. He called out for 2 men with lights to go with him. Lieutenant Murray sent up 2 Rangers that were eager for payback for what happened to Mason. Clark didn't mind they were gung-ho. Clark then thought through the emotion of watching Mason die. Reason took hold and he didn't see any logical explanation to kill any more of these creatures. It would be better to take them alive. He told the 2 men to return down the path. Just as they backed out, he heard a moaning cry from deep in the mountain cavern.
And someone Good evening, everyone. Sorry if we got started without you. Please like, share, subscribe. We're going to look into giants tonight. The existence of giants in the Bible, Native American folklore. Tommy, Austin, hello. William, hello. I think Bin Laden was tall. I don't know how tall, but he was over 6 foot. There's an interview with L.A. Marzulli with one of the alleged members of the team that went in to save the Marines that were in trouble. Bigfoot could be considered a giant. That's true, but I'm putting Bigfoot out on their own. We'll do something on Bigfoot another night. But we're going to look into giants tonight. We're going to start the show looking into the Kandahar giant because it's one of the more recent stories of one. Nephilim, Robbie says, Nola, happy Labor Day. Tomorrow's my birthday. I can't wait. I even got my dad's old hat on. I bought him. Yeah, I would say Bigfoot and Yeti are in their own categories. But I find this very intriguing. Car edits, you could help me, but you got to hang around a bit. You got to earn my trust. I can't just give you the keys to the car right away. But I want to look into L.A. Marzulli. I also want to look into a soldier's version of the story. Thank you, Noah. So let's look into some more of the Kandahar's giant, just because it's an alleged military thing. There's people that have spoken out about it in the military recently. And I think it's super interesting. And then I even have a video on the Kandahar giant or other giants in Afghanistan and parts of that part of the world of people coming out saying their family used to feed these creatures. So we shall see. We shall look into some more. Let's look at a soldier's. Where is it? I want to look at the other one with L.A. Marzulli. I'm sorry. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Billy,
with him when he was just hanging out with his buddies in the mountains, and he said when he was by himself one time.
The world, and that's why I am on the trail of the Nephilim. The Genesis 6 narrative states that the Nephilim are on the earth in those days and also afterwards. If that's true, can we find evidence that corroborates this? I'm L.A. Marzulli. Join me as we go on the trail of the Nephilim. You'll find that interesting. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. Folks at Global Gold Investment.
Unbeknownst to me, talking about.
All right, let me get through the bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm new at this. We're a new show. Give me a break.
And Terry sort of, was kind enough to give me your contact info, and here you are. And thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem, LA. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for having me on your show, and hopefully I can, shed some light on some of this stuff that people have been, unbeknownst to me, talking about for a very long time now. And I guess in recent years, it's gained more interest and more traction. So, thanks for having me on the show. I'll, answer whatever I can just based on whatever I know.
Okay, well, let me just start at the beginning. Where's the connection here between your family, your family, and the so-called Kandahar giant? How does all this connect?
Well, I guess you could say it connects with my father and his childhood and upbringing with my grandmother, who, when he was young, he witnessed doing some weird things that he didn't really understand until he was a little older. When he was kind of a wild and crazy guy in his youth, and he'd go out and yeah, we all are. And he would. Long story short, he would go out like camping with his buddies and stuff, in the mountains there. And there's a lot of I guess outdoorsy things to do. There's fishing, there's swimming, and camping, and just playing cards and stuff, right by the river. Just like a lot of people and a lot of cultures do. And
but let me answer. Where is this taking place?
This is taking place in Kandahar, in Afghanistan.
Okay.
My father was born in, I believe it was either 3/13/36 or 3/13/37.
What's up,
I
Mark?
have his death certificate.
Okay.
I'd have to look, but it's one of those years. He was about 77 when he died, and that would have been in 2013 now, at the end of March. But this pretty much began, I guess, with him when he was just hanging out with his buddies in the mountains. And he said when he was by himself one time, he saw something that was really, really strange, and it piqued his interest. So he asked his mother about it, and she told him that, there was something that lives in those caves, and he's smart to stay out of those caves. She basically told him, if you want to find out what that thing is, you're probably going to regret it. So I advise you stay out. And then after that, he connected 2 and 2, and he's like, oh, okay, I guess, every time we go up near this cave and leave this animal, perhaps that's what we're doing. And that's indeed what they were doing. So
now, when you say leave the animal, and I know something here, and I'll let you tell your story, then I'll tell you what I know.
Okay.
I think it's going to be interesting. When you say leave the animal, elaborate on that. What are you talking about?
Well, my family owned animals over there. They raised for food, and periodically they would go to a certain location, and my father would witness his mother lead an animal up to this area where there was a cave, like within a stone's throw away, very, very close to where they would tie this animal up. And that's pretty much what he told me he saw when he was very young. And then when he was older and he had seen this big giant footprint after it rained one day. And then when he questioned his mother about it, that's when, he kind of made the connections that perhaps, that's why they were leaving animals there when he was much younger. And it's really wild stuff, but I can only go based on what my father told me, and he told me that he was a little bit freaked out when she told him that. So he dug a little more and asked her about it, and she pretty much said that it's a jinn. It's this I don't know if you would call it a demon or just another being that lives in the earth. But apparently there's a bunch of these things, and there were people for generations going and leaving these, I guess you would call them offerings, peace offerings, or just like, like World War I, Neville the Appeaser, something like that.
Right.
I don't know if there was like this trust that had formed between certain bloodlines and families throughout, time, but that's what I came to know from my father.
It's interesting you should say that, because I've heard that exact story from another source saying that they would bring goats or animals and tie the animal up near the cave, and of course that would appease the giant or the giants plural that were there.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Did your father ever say anything about how big it was? Had he ever seen it, or did his mother ever say how big it was, or had she seen it?
I don't believe so. My father never told me he saw anything. He just told me he saw a gigantic footprint, and he didn't specify like how many digits it had, like if it had 6 toes or 5 toes. Right. I didn't actually know about the 6-toe thing until much later,
Okay.
After he died. And I saw another video on it, and I did a little more digging, and I saw something about the Jaredites. I guess there were these people that came to America, and they fit the description of these tall, redheaded giants. And that's, I guess that's open for discussion. A lot of people are very skeptical of this whole subject matter. So,
well, no, I understand that, but part of my wheelhouse is being on the trail of the Nephilim, which is the name of the show, and I know that the giants did exist. I mean, I have a picture of a giant skeleton that I discovered in the Catalina Island Museum.
Lots of them.
And I was probably never supposed to see that, but at any rate, there was a cache of records that had gone missing for like 40 or 50 years. And it was the Ralph Glidden collection. And there was a trunk that they found. John Borgina actually found it in the Wrigley Theater on the island of Catalina, in the attic in the middle of nowhere. So this made the front page of the LA Times. And one thing led to another. I was able to go out. So by the time I get to the museum, which is months later, everything's sorted, everything is cataloged, put in manila envelopes, folders, museum boxes tucked away in a vault. It's not like it's not like opening a trunk and going, oh my gosh, what's this? It had already been sorted through. So I got there after the museum had closed. There were 2 tables with white paper on them. I had museum gloves. My camera was set up. John Borgina asked me, what do you want to see? I said, bring out the pictures. So he brings out several boxes, museum boxes of pictures, and I start sorting through them. Now, I've been in archives before, and most of the time you never find anything.
No, they keep all the good shit.
Immediately, and I found a picture of Ralph Glidden leaning on a shovel, and in front of him is a skeleton in situ. It's not disarticulated. It's not a bone pile. The skeleton is there. The skull is huge.
Right, Jet?
And that skeleton, I actually sent that picture, my picture of the picture. Okay, so it's original stuff. I sent it to 3 different researchers. Excuse me. All of them put that at just around 9 feet tall. So we know that and Native Americans have the same oral tradition, same legend of red-haired giants, 6 fingers coming over to the Americas. So in the biblical narrative, and this is what's interesting. It talks about Joshua and Caleb going into the promised land.
In the Bible.
The Nephilim tribes are there. So we think that there's a diaspora as Joshua and Caleb press the conquest, these guys just leave. So Afghanistan is not that far away from the modern nation of, let's say, Syria or Israel or Iraq. I mean, it just isn't.
The Euphrates River.
Yeah.
And if you see, part of this thing is, you just said something that this has been going on for generations. And I've often stated that when the soldiers shot the Kandahar giant, the stench was unbelievable. The thing was about 12 to 14 feet tall, but the smell from the body.
That's right, RJJ.
Unbelievable. And so you ask yourself, how old is this thing? Is it 1,000 years old? Is it 2,000 years old? So that's what I know. And, it's like the Mormons call them the Jaredites. So we're talking, I think, the same thing, maybe just different interpretations. So when you hear that, what do you think?
I mean, I wasn't there, but I think anything's possible. And my father said that the footprint he saw was almost as long as he was tall. He said it was very big. He almost could have laid down in it.
How old was your dad when he saw this?
He was a teenager.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a teenager when he saw this. And it really shook him. It really freaked him out. In fact, he was so scared that after that, he didn't go camping too much anymore. And his friends kind of made fun of him. And for the rest of his life, my dad said that he was very, very careful as to who he told about that. Just because it got him a lot of ridicule when he tried to talk about it with someone. And he was scared of his mother. So I guess he was told to keep it quiet as well.
Tell me more about his mother. I mean, your grandmother, what was she involved in?
That I'm not exactly sure, but my dad said that she would consort with spirits, and she would basically like have these jinns, these like creatures, sweep her floors for her.
Demons.
My father said that he can recall times when the broom was just levitating off the ground, and it was, that's very cliche. I told him, because witches are supposed to ride brooms and stuff. But he said, sure enough, she had all of these things in motion without even being present in the room. So I imagine what she did was she used it for either nefarious purposes or to, I don't know, I guess you could say just make life easier. Just it's kind of like a Faustian thing where maybe she knew that later she's going to have to pay a price for it.
Her soul.
Yeah. It always ends up being spiritual.
Tattoo on her forehead was, it was, I guess, an attempt to mitigate any type of consequences in this life. Yeah.
What was the tattoo? Do you know? I mean, do you have a picture of it, or can you draw it? What did the tattoo show?
It was Arabic writing.
Okay.
I once saw a picture of my grandmother holding me in her arms when I was just an infant.
Funny shit, RJJ.
I don't know whatever happened to that photo. I think my uncle has it, and he's back in Pakistan, I believe, in Karachi, and he has been there since, I believe, the last pandemic started. He had to go back. He had a stroke or a heart attack or something when he was living with my sister in New Jersey. So he has all of these really interesting photos, and I believe he's the one that has one of those, but that's probably in the old country. So
wow. Have you gone back?
I did see that before.
Have you gone back to Kandahar at all?
I've never gone back to Kandahar. No,
I wouldn't either.
9/11 happened. I believe it was the third or fourth day of my 9th grade year when I was in high school. I was going to William Tennant High School in Warminster, Pennsylvania at the time, and that's pretty much when I decided they might think, I don't know. My uncle told me to never go there. They might think I'm a spy,
Okay.
Straight up. Plus, it doesn't help that my uncle in foster care was in the CIA.
Oh, there you go.
So I don't know who would see that.
How ironic.
People have their ways of doing research on you. And he told me it would be a good idea for you to never go to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you know me or our family, you will probably get kidnapped and ransomed.
Wow.
And you may have to extract yourself.
Yeah.
So he warned me about it.
Wow.
And I don't speak the language. I did when I was a child. And then I went in foster care, and my parents' parental rights were terminated. So that would have been in, I believe, 98. I stopped visitations with them. I went into foster care in 95.
Crazy.
And I was told by my uncle, even when I was an adult, to stay the heck out of there. Yeah, it wouldn't end well. I don't know how it would be now, but while the Americans were there, he said it wasn't a good idea.
That makes sense. Wow.
Yeah.
Why, can I ask you a personal question? Why did you, how did you wind up in foster care?
Well, my father came here when I was about 10 months old. It was me, it was my sister immediately older than me, and then it was also my mother, her brother, who's my uncle, who I told you might have the photo of my grandmother, and it was my 2 oldest sisters as well. So it was the 4 kids, the parents, and my uncle. And I'm not sure why they wanted to move here, but I'm assuming it was because the Russians were invading. And my sister's 3 years older than me, and she was born in Pakistan. So they must have came here. My sister was born in, I think, 83 or 84.
Right.
I believe 84, like late 84. And they
Thanks,
left
Adam.
Afghanistan when I believe a couple of my uncles died fighting the Russians. And then my mother had family in Karachi, and we went there, and from there we came to America.
I see. So from Kandahar to Pakistan to America. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, and there were stories about my father, how he got all of us into the country, and apparently he'd be gone for months and months at a time. And I don't know if he was working, clandestinely for, the U.S. government. I mean, we have always speculated that he did, and that's how we got here.
Oh, yeah, he did.
And then it was a little weird the circumstances in which, I was put in foster care, and then next thing you know, I have an uncle who was in the CIA,
Yeah.
lived there, and this happened right before 9/11 happened, and this guy was extremely scary, my uncle. Very, very cool guy. His name was John, and I missed the hell out of that guy. It was awesome.
And you don't see him no more.
We always had the feeling my dad maybe worked with U.S. intelligence or something, and that's how we were able to come here. And it could all be a farce. I mean, for all I know, he just smuggled heroin over there because he did that as well.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah.
Wow. Let me ask you something. With your grandmother, did you ever meet your grandmother, your father's mother, the one who was for all practical purposes, a witch, who would bring animals to the giant's cave?
Yeah, apparently she held me in her arms, and that's who was in the photo with me as an infant.
But you later on in life,
is my father's mother.
No connection.
Is the witch, and no, I guess she died after we moved to America.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did your dad ever point out to you where the cave's location was?
No, he just said it was near his village someplace. He said it was a little bit like off the beaten path. You had to kind of know where it was. But apparently a lot of people knew, a lot of people who dabbled in those dark arts knew about it. Other people, it's like there were rumors and I guess conspiracy theories about a giant living in a cave near the village. But I guess you really had to be in the know.
Very interesting.
But he said it was near the village.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the record. It's an amazing story, and what sort of your testimony is just yet another witness which validates what we broke in our Watchers series. That's Watchers 10 with the Kandahar giant. And I was actually threatened by a guy from a deep state, literally.
I might be next. I've thought about it. I've been warned about it. I had a couple friends who saw the Terry Carter interview tell me, people might come after you for this. And I'm like, well, people have been coming after me my whole life. I have a bullet in my neck. I mean, what do you want me to say? I'm not scared to die. I'm not suicidal. Let's throw that out there. Yeah. But I'm not scared to die. So.
Well, what's interesting is the shooters were dispatched. In other words, one patrol. The story, as we were told from the shooter, there was a patrol in Afghanistan and Kandahar looking for high-value targets, and they were dispatched. They missed their rally point. They missed their second rally point. Next morning, a helicopter drops them off in the same location, and they're following a trail. And we show all this in the Watchers, in our Watchers. It's in Watchers 10, and they come around this area. It's a very mountainous area. They come around this trail, and they see bones and just it's like this really weird deal. And they're high up, and below them is the valley, and the cave is above them. And as they're walking on this ledge that overlooks the valley, that's when the giant comes out. 6 fingers, red hair. He's brandishing a very large spear. He moves with such agility that it stuns the group. It stuns the platoon. They're frozen in their tracks. Who wouldn't be? They're seeing something that's 14 feet tall. I mean, that's a really big guy.
Yeah.
And before anybody could do anything, the giant has run and speared one of the guys and held him up. And then somebody yells, shoot him in the head, and they just open fire. They essentially decapitate him. And then what happens is this guy who's impaled, he dies, unfortunately, never makes it out of there. And they chopper, a big, huge Huey comes in, they net the giant up, they take the body back, and they're all debriefed and told never to say anything about it again. Where have we heard that before?
Yeah.
I've had other people come up to me at conferences and talk about this, other witnesses, and that's all I'll say. I believe it's true. I believe that, your story just adds another layer of credibility to what we're looking at. And it's, in my opinion, it's very possible that the giants from 3,000 years ago literally left the area and migrated into Kandahar and basically set up shop there. Because, one thing that you said, this goes back generations. So, it's interesting that you know that and stated that. Thanks for coming on the record, Ray. I'll give you the last word, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I do know something else that I spoke to my father about that I didn't mention in Terry's interview. And that was that there are these creatures in the earth called Mabazume. I spoke to Terry about this, but I didn't say it in the interview with him. Essentially, they call them like, I guess a word for monster, but they're like these acid lickers. And I'm not sure if it's in the Quran or in the Hadith, but apparently they live in the earth and they're licking the side of the mountain and their tongues are like acid. And at the end of every day, they get tired and they say, okay, we're going to stop. And if they don't say we're going to stop, inshallah, then otherwise the mountain grows back. But if the day that they say we're going to stop and start tomorrow, inshallah,
in God's name,
the mountain's not going to grow back and they're going to break out of the earth. And my dad said that in the end of days, there are going to be these creatures, Mabazume, that come to the surface and attack people. And I don't know if it's these giants. I don't know if it's other things as well. But I thought that was another tidbit that should maybe be shared, because my grandmother is over here telling my dad that they're jinns. And then, she's doing the black magic. She's leaving animals up there.
Very odd.
Hear the Quran or the Hadith. I'm a Christian. I'm not a Muslim, but I know that my dad said in one of those books, there's a tale of these creatures that live in the earth, and God's supposed to release them in the end of days.
And what's interesting about that ties into, in my opinion, where there's actually scripture that talks about in the day, it'll be like the days of Noah when Jesus returns. I mean, that's what Jesus tells us himself. It'll be like the days of Noah when I return. And that begs the question, what differentiates those days? The giants were here. The giants were roaming the earth. So I find it very interesting, the correlation, in the Hadith or in the Quran that talks about the same thing. I find that very, very interesting. But Ray, thanks so much for coming on the record. I really appreciate it. And please.
Wild stuff. There's been interviews with one of the military members of the Special Forces, an operator, speaking about this as well. Oh, I may have seen a UFO. If you have pictures you want to send me or you want to be interviewed, Anunnaki, email me at nateslivetalk@yahoo.com. Please like, share, subscribe to Nate's Live Talk. We do live podcasts looking into all kinds of different stuff. Tonight we're looking into giants a little bit. Last night we looked into aliens. Adam says there could be the sounds they heard out of the crack in the Euphrates drying up. We're going to look into that. I have a video I saved because I remember you saying that yesterday, and I looked into it a little bit today, Adam. Anunnaki says this is real. C. White says, were you there? No, I was not there. Thank you, Anunnaki. Salute. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. We do an interactive podcast looking at all different types of subjects. Politics, sports, troll show on Friday nights. Check us out. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. So what do you guys think so far? We'll probably go back to politics tomorrow night. What's up, dude? The Yankees. Giants are fallen angels, Nelson says. I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. There's a correlation between giants, the Bible, the Nephilim. Yep. Stole the words right out of your mouth, Nelson. The Watchers. Correct. Do you guys believe in the Kandahar giant? The story we just talked about? King Nimrod? Possibly Anunnaki. 67% of our poll believes giants existed. I wouldn't doubt it, Anunnaki. I would not fucking doubt it. Very little surprises me anymore. I don't know. We could look into that. But I want to look into the Euphrates River and the correlation with giants. I think the Smithsonian hides a lot of stuff, Nelson. I agree. The San Francisco Giants. You're nuts, C-White. So let's look into this one. The Euphrates River dries up and giant Gilgamesh is found. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Let's check out this next one. Let me know what you guys think. I like to hear other people's opinions. Unless they become trolls. Or get rude. We don't do the rude fuck shit here except for Friday nights.
The Euphrates River is an ancient waterway that has played a vital role in shaping human history. However, the Euphrates River is an ancient waterway that has played a vital role in shaping human history. However, it has been gradually drying up in recent years, plunging millions of people into a period of unprecedented drought. Spanning from Turkey to Syria.
Thank you, Diane. Subscribe.
This stretch of river has been the major source of water in the region for over 10,000 years, sustaining human civilizations and allowing them to flourish. However, the drying up of the Euphrates is not entirely unexpected, as it has been predicted in a terrifying prophecy that seems to be coming true. The significance of the Euphrates River in human history cannot be overstated. It has been responsible for creating the Fertile Crescent, a part of ancient Mesopotamia where the first and oldest recorded agricultural practices originally began. In times of old, the Euphrates provided a constant source of clean water for men to practice farming and other agricultural practices, which later spread to other parts of the world. The Euphrates River was also one of the first rivers to be recorded in the Bible, as it was among the 4 rivers that were said to originate from the Garden of Eden. In biblical records, the Euphrates served as a key dividing barrier between the East and West, shaping key events such as wars and invasions that have in turn shaped the distribution of people and power in much of Asia and North Africa. The river's significance spreads as far back as over 450,000 years ago, with Shulian stone artifacts and the remains of early Homo erectus having been found buried in its banks. Stretching a distance of over 1,730 miles, originating from the Armenian mountains in eastern Turkey, the Euphrates is the longest river in Asia, and together with the river Tigris, makes up the Fertile Crescent. The river flows through steep gorges and canyons in Turkey, then through lowlands in Syria, before cutting clear across Iraq and entering into the Persian Gulf. However, this ancient river is now drying up, with a significant drop in water levels across the length of its path. In most places in the lower part of the river, mostly in Iraq, the river has completely dried up, with the riverbed now completely visible, and what used to be submerged underwater, now barren lands of cracked soil.
This is biblical prophecy to you people that don't know. This was written in the Bible.
In most places where the water has dried up, farmlands have become barren, as there is no source of irrigation for the crops,
right,
pushing
RJ?
Villages into unusually long droughts. The fishing economies of these locations are now practically non-existent, as whatever small pools of water are left are contaminated or undrinkable. The once fertile crescent that gave birth to the world's agriculture is now a desolate land, and is now practically unrecognizable from the last decade. The Euphrates River has been an important feature of many fascinating stories and historical events. Among these is the supposed discovery of the tomb of King Gilgamesh, an ancient ruler of the city of Europe. The Epic of Gilgamesh, which recounts the life of this king, is considered a Middle Eastern literary masterpiece and was written 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. According to the book, Gilgamesh was buried under the Euphrates River in a tomb constructed after the river's waters parted following his death. Gilgamesh is king of Uruk, an ancient kingdom on the banks of the Euphrates in what is the present-day Iraq. There is even some footage claiming to show the discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb, which many find intriguing. However, let me warn you that the authenticity of this footage is debatable.
This is supposed to be Gilgamesh's tomb.
To know more about this discovery, let us go back in time to 2003. German explorers and archaeologists led by Jörg Fassbender found an ancient tomb that they believe belonged to giants that roamed the earth centuries or even millennia ago. The researchers reported that they discovered the bodies of massive giants and sent them to laboratories for testing, including carbon dating. Since the discovery, not much has been said about it, and it has been kept under wraps. As expected, the discovery has been the subject of some controversy. In the story, Gilgamesh was described as a giant who was 17 feet tall. He was reportedly the son of a Sumerian king and a Mesopotamian goddess, and ended up ruling over the land of Uruk, which later became a wreck. It is possible that he was buried in his hometown, and his body was eventually discovered in 2003. Gilgamesh was essentially a demigod.
No, it wasn't,
and in his reign, he waged wars against his enemies, and sometimes acted as a bit of a tyrant to his people. Not surprising, considering he had godlike strength and could pretty much do whatever he wanted. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is said that the gods finally listened to the cries of Gilgamesh's people, who had to live in fear of their all-powerful king, and they wanted a savior. So Anu, the king of the gods, used clay and his own spit to make Enkidu, a wild man who would challenge Gilgamesh to a contest of strength. When Gilgamesh and Enkidu eventually came to blows, it was pretty epic, and their duel reportedly lasted days. Eventually, Gilgamesh still managed to eke out the win, and despite the win, he was reportedly so impressed by Enkidu that they eventually became friends. Later on, when Enkidu was eventually struck by death, Gilgamesh was so grief-stricken that he basically became a philosopher. The death of his friend caused him to question the meaning of life and the value of all human accomplishments when we're all going to end up dead someday. Enkidu's death also caused Gilgamesh to become a better person. He cast away all his pride and set out on an epic quest to find the meaning of life and hopefully even defeat death. For many years, everyone believed that the Epic of Gilgamesh was nothing more than a literary concept, and the ancient king probably didn't even exist. However, the discovery of Fassbender changed everything. Interestingly, the team of explorers didn't just see the burial site. According to Fassbender, the team uncovered over 100,000 hectares of land and property, many of which were described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. He also claimed that they found Babylonian houses and properties scattered around the area, all buried underground for thousands of years. It is fascinating to note that all of this was found in the desert, which is quite remarkable considering the significance of the Euphrates River in regard to biblical prophecy. As we get closer to the return of the Messiah, it is astonishing that more and more discoveries are being made that point towards the biblical narrative being fact. Aside from this tomb, there were other important discoveries that were made due to drying up of the Euphrates River. According to scientists, the Euphrates riverbed has revealed 6 distinct historical periods, each with its own unique artifacts and treasures. These periods include the Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, Greek, Byzantine, and Islamic eras. Without diverting the river or creating lakes in the desert, Syria constructed the Euphrates Dam in 1968, which led to the flooding of many ancient sites along the river. However, a few monuments and artifacts were saved from destruction. The region along the Euphrates River is home to hundreds of Syriac Christian monasteries and numerous cemeteries. Interestingly, when the sun shines and the lake water is clear, the submerged cemeteries can be clearly seen. In the western district of Raqqa, a few graves have been found on the right bank of the lake. However, the left bank has not been thoroughly studied due to its rockiness and difficulty in digging. Ancient cities and monuments have been revealed in Iraq as well. For example, the ancient city of Talbas was uncovered in Anna, Iraq, as the river's waters receded. Iraqi archaeologist Mohammed Jassim claimed that the lower water level at the Haditha Dam resulted in the appearance of at least 80 historical monuments. Additionally, the Antiquities Department in Duhak,
Wow.
Iraq's Kurdistan province, recently announced the discovery of a Mitanni Empire city that dates back 3,400 years, which was discovered when floodwaters in the Tigris River basin receded. Another incredible archaeological discovery made due to the drying up of the Euphrates River is the ancient city of Zakiko, which was mentioned in Babylonian writings. This city boasts several buildings, including a palace, a huge fence, and cuneiform texts that have been found. What's more, researchers were astonished by how well some of the underwater mud walls that had been sun-dried for over 40 years had held up. They believe this is because of a city-destroying earthquake that buried and protected the city for millennia with the debris of the higher portions of the walls. As we consider the fascinating discoveries around the Euphrates River, we cannot help but wonder what other artifacts and evidence may be hidden beneath its depths. Undoubtedly, there is much more history and knowledge waiting to be discovered, evidence that will only add to our understanding of ancient history. These discoveries truly shape our understanding of the past, and we cannot wait to see what else lies beneath the surface of the Euphrates River. So stay tuned for more exciting discoveries that will shed light on our ancient history.
Pretty interesting. Pretty friggin' interesting either
Many
way.
by now will know of the apocalypse.
Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Thank you for joining me tonight. I love doing these. It's fun to learn together. It makes you wonder. I've heard this many times looking into this stuff on my own, that we didn't go to Iraq for the reasons you think we did. I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard we went to Iraq for a lot of things. A lot of things. And it makes you, like, I know ISIS and the other one there, Hamas, a lot of them groups, they were destroying old temples, old cities. I'm sure we've done it as well. But I remember one of the biggest things they did before the last time we went at it with them, years back, was they were destroying a ton of old cities. I remember coming home from being on the boat, working, and my mother was crying. And I go, why are you crying over the news? What the fuck happened? And she's like, honey, they're destroying all of those people's history. Just destroying it. And the news said it was ISIS and them. I don't know who it was, because we all know God only knows what the news is telling us. Maybe they were destroying it before we got to it. Do you remember that, Adam? My mother was in tears. I'm like, why are you crying? What the hell's going on so bad? And she's like, Nathan, thousands of years, thousands and thousands of people's history and beautiful shit is just being destroyed. I remember it, watching it. They were just blowing up shit for the sake of blowing it up, it looked like. It makes you wonder what the why are we really there? It can't just be oil and money in Israel. And then you see all these Bible prophecies taking place and coming true. Santana says they were destroying so they couldn't access it. Possibly. Anunnaki says the aliens that I have photos of took me to a place, I think it's Fort Worth, Texas. It's a place that they are giving people to the aliens. Like I said, email me, nateslivetalk@yahoo.com. I told you that last night, Anunnaki. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. What up, Ado? I don't know. So we're going to look into the giants, the Nephilim, survived the flood and how. Because I think there's a biblical correlation to this. And I find it funny that when we did the alien research last night, all they did was say how like religion was dogma and don't listen to religion. A lot of the aliens said allegedly on the research we looked at last night. And I find it odd that the guy we watched talk about his grandma said that they were jinn, that she was a witch. I think all this stuff has a spiritual connection. I think it's esoteric, things we don't know about, ancient information. You're not getting sound? You should be. Everything's good on my end. Do you know the spirits of Flores, Indian? I don't know what you mean by Flores. Scott, it's got to be on your end. Crispy, salute. Maybe C. White. Yeah, I got you. Thank you for clarifying, Nelson. But I'm going to use the restroom. I'm going to let you guys listen to this, and when I get back, I will make it so you see the video.
Apocalyptical Hebrew text, the Book of Enoch, a text that is ascribed to the patriarch Enoch, who was the great-grandfather of Noah. Whilst the book contains events that coincide with biblical understanding, such as the flood, it also contains many aspects that are not considered biblically canon, or at least aspects that the average reader would not have considered because the Bible alone doesn't deem it necessary to explain. Of course, I'm mainly talking about the Watchers, the sons of God, who were essentially angels who in the Book of Enoch go against God's wishes and impregnate the mortal women. The Watchers, who in retrospect are fallen angels, are not exactly acknowledged by the Bible, but in the Book of Enoch they are key characters that serve as a catalyst for both the terrible things that come to plague the earth and also the reason why God sends a flood at all. As the Watchers impregnate the mortal women, this unholy union leads to the women producing monstrous offspring, giants with insatiable appetites and rageful tendencies. They are known simply as Nephilim. In today's episode, we'll be exploring what exactly happened to the Nephilim across multiple stories, including the Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, which is a fragmented Jewish follow-up to the Book of Enoch that details the Nephilim's fate, and the Bible, which interestingly does show us in several subsequent chapters that the giants remained on the earth in the days after Noah, which means that somehow they either survived the flood or were put back on the earth for some reason. According to Enochian legend, the Nephilim are born to the Watchers, courtesy of their human mothers, who were either seduced or arguably raped by the fallen angels during those times. Whilst it is not detailed if these Nephilim were born as giant babies or somehow born fully grown, we do know that they are monstrous, esurient, wicked beings that not only consume all the crops, trees, and animals, but also consume the mortal men, women, and at one point even themselves as they turned cannibal. The world was in distress, and the cry of the people reached the ears of God, who was displeased to learn of what had transpired. His angelic watchers had betrayed him, and now they brought forth a horde of creatures that were destroying the earth itself. In order to restore balance, God sent down his archangels to purge the evil that had coalesced on earth. Archangel Michael was sent to battle against Sumyaza, the leader of the Watchers, who had not deterred his angels from committing sin and transitioning into fallen angels. Archangel Raphael was sent to apprehend Azazel, a Watcher who had also shared the secrets of heaven with mankind and taught them how to fight and wage war on each other. Archangel Uriel is sent to warn Noah of what is soon to happen, that there will be a great deluge,
Looks like
and
Thor.
that he should hide himself until then, because he and his family are the chosen ones to survive, whilst everything else on earth will be destroyed and made new again. Archangel Gabriel, meanwhile, is sent to thin the horde of the Nephilim, as God tells him, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, and the children of the watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth. Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. For length of days shall they
I wouldn't
not
want to
have,
fuck with that dude.
and no request that they make of thee shall be granted unto their fathers on their behalf, for they hope to live an eternal life, and that each one of them will live 500 years. Enoch chapter 10. As we can see from these interactions, we learn quite quickly that whilst the Nephilim did run riot on the earth, their days were numbered. Indeed, Archangel Gabriel is seen to go on a killing spree as he reduces the number of Nephilim that are running rampant. Any that he manages to miss are taken care of by the flood, which God sends to destroy all life on earth, except for Noah and his family. Now, whilst all the giants do drown in this story, we are told that their spirits survive, and that from then onwards they would be known as evil spirits that dwell on the earth. Of these spirits, God tells Enoch, and the spirits of the giants will afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth and cause trouble. They will take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. Book of Enoch chapter 15. So indeed, the physical giants are destroyed, and they can no longer consume the landscape of the earth. They can no longer terrorize mankind, nor can they go about their violent rampages. For all intents and purposes, the reign of the giants ends here. But
Good
as
night,
God
Nelson.
tells Enoch, they do remain on a spiritual plane where they can oppress,
Subscribe.
destroy, attack, and work destruction on the earth. Arguably, they are not dead at all, considering that in their spiritual form, they continue the exact same behavior that they did when they were physically living. So in this aspect, you might say that the Nephilim did survive the flood, just not as they had originally intended. We do know why God keeps the Nephilim alive in this capacity, and that's to apparently punish mankind for their involvement with the Nephilim's
Correct. Someone
production
said that
and the
earlier.
events that had transpired. The men, as we learn from the Enochian legend, had fallen for the Watchers' knowledge and lapped up the secrets of heaven that the Watchers had revealed, whilst the women had allowed themselves to be seduced by the Watchers, assuming we go with the idea that they were seduced and not taken against their will. In effect, God kind of blames mankind for the Nephilim too. So he allows the Nephilim to live in their spirit form to punish mankind for their transgressions. These events coincide with the apocryphal Jewish book in the Book of Giants, though, of course, in this story, the perspective is shifted to that of the Nephilim. Specifically, we see the giant Mahweh come to terms with nightmares that he and his fellow giants are experiencing, and they begin to fret over the possibility that these dreams are signs that they have done terrible things and would be punished for them.
Look at that fucking
Eventually,
thing.
Mahweh is convinced to visit Enoch, who they believe can interpret the dreams, for which Enoch reveals is indeed a bad omen for the giants, who will pay for the carnage they have amassed and never know peace. However, there is implied hope for the Nephilim, because Enoch explains that if they change their ways and if they relinquish the bonds of evil, they will be forgiven. Unfortunately, it would appear that either none of the Nephilim were able to repent, or God wasn't feeling particularly forgiving because none of them appeared to be spared. As with the Enochian legend, God
Seems
does
like
send a
it.
flood to wipe out the Nephilim, and those that are able to escape the flood are hunted down by angels. In fact, in the Manichaean version of the Book of Giants, God actually sends the biblical monster Leviathan to mop up those who have escaped drowning. Ultimately, both texts are so fragmentary that it is hard to come to a definitive conclusion, though it is agreed that from what we have, the giants are destroyed by God, either in the flood or by the angels he sends to have at them. In the Bible, meanwhile, the Nephilim are acknowledged as having existed, as we are told in Genesis. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown, Genesis 6:4. As we can see here, the Bible does not go into the detail that the book of Enoch does with the Watchers, and just how the Nephilim were created unto the world. Indeed, we are told that the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. And this is closest we get to the suggestion that angels had impregnated women. That is, if we go with the idea that the sons of God are not men, but actually angels. When the flood does arrive in the next chapter, the Bible does not subscribe to the idea that the Nephilim continue to exist as evil spirits on the earth. Once the flood comes, it is implied that they, amongst every other creature that didn't make it onto the ark, were destroyed in totality. We are told, the waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. Genesis 7:20-23. So, with this in mind, it should be pretty much guaranteed that we'd never see the Nephilim again, right? Well, not exactly. Several chapters later in Numbers, we are told that Moses sends several men to scout and explore Canaan, which has been promised to be given to the Israelites by God, so that they might discover what the land is like, whether the people who live there are weak or strong, whether the towns are fortified or unprotected, whether the soil is fertile or poor, and generally find out what kind of resistance would await them. Now the scouts do go out across Canaan and learn many things. They find fruit of the land, they find milk and honey, they research the people who live there, the Canaanites, and find them to be very powerful, who live in cities that are large and fortified. But there is one discovery they make in Canaan that they probably wish they hadn't. The Nephilim had seemingly returned. The scouts report to Moses, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Numbers 13:31-33. So how could this be?
It's all over the
Nephilim
Bible.
were destroyed in the flood during the times of Noah. A simple, albeit baseless idea is that the flood wasn't as thorough as we are led to believe, and that perhaps the Nephilim were able to navigate the turbulent waters and somehow find their way to dry land once the water levels reduced. Another similar idea is that the Nephilim, after being warned by Enoch of their fate, as they are in the book of Giants, went into hiding and were somehow able to escape the flood through either some clever ingenuity or some archaic magic. Of course, these ideas seem two-dimensional and lack any real substance that is really convincing. They're more akin to those bad Star Wars movies where somehow Palpatine returned and likewise somehow the Nephilim returned too. So how do we come up with a more legitimate explanation? Well, to do that, we'll need to acknowledge that perhaps these aren't the same Nephilim from the days of Noah, because all of those were indeed wiped out in the flood, but that these Nephilim are brand new, or at least more recent.
Must be related to Kamala.
If we assume that these more recent Nephilim were created the same way that the originals were, then it might be suggested that there were other fallen angels who had fallen into the same trap as the Watchers and had come down to earth to lay with mortal women. The original Watchers, according to the Enochian legend, were rounded up by the archangels and actually cast down into an underground prison thousands of miles beneath the desert, known as the Duodel. These angels, according to the legends, are said to still be there now, where they undergo great suffering and torment for their
Just
open
like the
rebellion
Euphrates.
against God and for their infringement upon his rules. As the events of Numbers take place many years after the times of the Watchers, or the Sons of God, it can be assumed that these were also brand new angels who fathered these Nephilim, those who evidently did not learn from the mistakes of those who came before them, or perhaps didn't know about them altogether. Another idea here is that indeed the angels, regardless of their time of existence, did know about the folly of the Watchers, but that they were still unable to resist the temptation of mortal women. Hence why Nephilim are reported as being seen here in Canaan. But if we don't think that the angels would make the same mistake twice, there are some other ideas available, one of which causes us to challenge the idea that the sons of God, as mentioned in Genesis 6 verse 4, applies to angels, or whether it applies to men. Now, if men are actually these sons of God, then men are the ones who bring forth the Nephilim by sleeping with women. But how can this be? Well, again, there's a lot of speculation here. But one idea is that when Canaan, who is Noah's son and the first Canaanite, is cursed by his father, his descendants become cursed too, the sons of Shem and Japheth. These being Canaan's brothers, and thus the nephews of Canaan, may have at some point intermingled with the daughters of Canaan, this being something of a violation in the eyes of God. Time and time again, we see God warn those a part of his covenant not to make wives out of the Canaanite women. And yet time and time again, we see many of the covenant do exactly that. These new Nephilim therefore can be seen as a direct consequence of the chosen people of Israel, who have fornicated with the cursed people of Canaan. Furthermore, exemplifying why the two did not belong together, because together they could only create something as abominable as more Nephilim.
That's crazy.
Unfortunately, this is only a simple idea that cannot be substantiated, and it is indeed more likely that the sons of God refer to fallen angels because man would be the son of man, this man being Adam, not God. This brings me to the final idea I have on this account from Numbers 13, the idea that the scouts hadn't seen Nephilim at all, but either mistook some of the tall men of Canaan for giants, or had been so afraid about invading Canaan, with its reinforced cities, strong fortifications, and powerful men, that they made the whole thing up to dissuade Moses from agreeing with Caleb, who wanted to go up into Canaan and take the land by force. You'll notice that Numbers tells us that the scouts spread a bad report, which implies that whatever he told Moses was either a misinterpretation down to sheer ignorance or a complete fabrication made out of fear for the Canaanites. The idea that the scouts were fearful of the Canaanites, leading them to make up the report about the Nephilim, can be legitimized by the fact that the scout does declare to Moses that they cannot attack the Canaanites because he believed they were so much stronger than them. On the other hand, the idea that the scout had simply misinterpreted what he saw can also be legitimized by the scout's report that the descendants of Anak had come from the Nephilim, and that these were the giants he was supposedly seeing. Anak, a word believed to mean giant in Hebrew, was also a minor character in the Bible, and is named as being the progenitor of the Anakites, or the Anakim, these being the people who inhabited Canaan before the arrival of the Israelites. Of course, this just leaves us with more questions. How did these Anakim come into existence? How tall were they? Were they as big and ferocious as their Nephilim forefathers, or were they smaller and more docile? What was their nature in comparison to their evil fathers, and perhaps more importantly, were they a product of Nephilim human relations, or were these the product of men sleeping with Canaanite women, hence why they existed after the flood? Unfortunately, we may never really know. What we do know is that biblical attitude towards both Nephilim and Anakim is similar. Both are living examples of sin, and both are destined to be removed from the earth. The Nephilim, as we know, were removed by the flood, but the Anakim, as we later learn in the Bible, are all destroyed by Caleb and Joshua. We are told specifically of this in Joshua's chapter. At that time, Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. Joshua 11:21. Beyond Joshua's encounter with the Anakim, we don't see the giants maintain any significant prominence that would indicate they were too much of a problem. Indeed, we do see David run into what can be presumed as giants in the second book of Samuel, where he and his mighty men face off against Ishbi-Benob, a giant wielding a spearhead that weighed 300 shekels, Goliath's brother, and a giant man with 6 fingers and 6 toes, who some scholars make effort to attribute to Gilgamesh. These giants are all believed to have been descended from Rapha, those who take on the name Raphaim to likely delineate themselves from the likes of the Nephilim and the Anakim. So by this logic, whether we're talking about Raphaim, Anakim, or any other kind of giant in the Bible, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that they have at some point been simply grouped as Nephilim because of how big they were. Those who were said to see these giants in biblical times would not have lived during the times of the flood, so they could not possibly have known whether the giants they saw were Nephilim or not. Yet, because of how fierce and terrifying and abnormal they appear to be, the word Nephilim is easily assigned to them, as we see the scout do in Numbers 13. Therefore, one can suggest that the Nephilim never did survive the flood, these being the ones with the supernatural heritage on the account of their fathers being angels. Every other giant since then, however, may have been simply misappropriated under the term Nephilim, even though their fathers weren't fallen angels and they weren't monstrous creatures. In fact,
they pulled the old
only thing
switcheroo.
the second-generation giants had in common with the Nephilim was that they were on the losing side when it came to God putting over his chosen people. As always, guys, if you've enjoyed today's video, then...
So, there's some biblical background. Like I said earlier, I find a connection through religion with this stuff, as well as aliens. I believe the Bible is a historical book. Diane says they left out Enoch because maybe didn't want to scare humans. We need Enoch. Maybe why God is allowing some info. Maybe. You can still go read the book of Enoch. Bible says if God destroys most of humanity again, he would not use a flood. No. I think he said next time's fire. Hopefully it's not in any lifetime soon. Hopefully we figure it out and God has mercy on us. But the more you look into this stuff, the more the rabbit hole goes on forever. Thanks, Dela. Dela, I bought this for my dad. This is the 4th of July cap from a long time ago. At least 10 years ago now. It's got the gold brim. It says the Bronx inside of it. And I figured I'd wear it for him tonight. The Red Sox gave away a game today. Yes. I hear you, Jet. Yeah, it's one of the only things I wanted that he had. Just because I bought it for him, I wanted it. I want to wear it again. Lovelock, Nevada. Yeah, I want to look into some of the stuff that we have in America now. I want to look into the Native American stuff. So I will look into Lovelock, Nevada. Dela, what would you like to look up as well? I know there's been tons and tons and tons of skeletons found in the U.S. Tons of them. Andrew Dawson or Andre Dawson? I've heard of Andre, not Andrew. Actually, I think I've heard of Andrew Dawson. Has he? Oh, that's the kid that got... Is that the guy that had the film that they can't find now? He made like a TikTok. I know who you're talking about. I think that's his name. Andrew Dawson is the kid that had the film of the guy on the mountain. Yeah, we're going to look into that. Well, they weren't Native Americans. The natives used to have to fight with them. And I'm going to show you guys that video coming up. Ozzy, salute. Please like, share, subscribe. But almost every culture has stories of giants. I find it interesting. And it's always involved in a way like, in a biblical type way, or in a belief type way. Yeah, was he unalived or did he disappear? I couldn't find that much out about him. I heard reports that he passed away. I heard reports he was disappearing. And then I heard reports saying he was never right again. So I don't know what to believe. But we are going to look into that in this upcoming hour. For shizzle. Let's check out our poll. Do you believe in giants? Did you believe giants existed? 68% say yes. 32% say no. Oh, there's something biblical about it. Same thing with UFOs, aliens. I think they all have something to do with the Bible. Because you got to think, all that stuff was written in a way that they didn't have words and technology like we did today. So they might have called a spaceship a chariot of fire. Right? Think about it. If you lived in those times, you would call a spaceship a chariot of fire, probably. You would call... you could call a demon an alien. Or an angel, for that matter. And if you look at like Machu Picchu and other places, and even paintings from back in the day, there's UFOs in them. And it looks like in some of them there's like spacemen and shit. It's really fascinating. And I love looking at these things with you guys live. I think it's really cool to do. And everyone can chime in with what they think, their opinions. We can look up videos together live. I thank you guys for hanging out, as always. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. It helps a lot with the algorithm. We are growing at a very fast pace. I have almost doubled in subscribers in a week. I thank you guys so much. That's what turns a true story into a conspiracy theory. Yeah, cover-ups. Absolutely. So let's look into, you guys want to look into Andrew Dawson first? It was a recent giant allegedly seen. This videotape on it. Or we can look into the Lovelock, Nevada giants. And the native history of giants. Andrew Sipple says giants 100% exist. It's in the Bible. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're researching, Andrew. Love Miss, salute. Love Miss says there is a portal that mankind can travel through that's hiding right on Earth. That portal connects to 6 dimensions. Have you ever traveled it, love? I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. There's not much I wouldn't believe in nowadays. I've seen a lot of weird shit. I don't think everyone's fucking lying. How would there be so many stories if it was lies? Portals are starting to appear. And you hear about ghosts and demons almost all the time. People that go in that are sensitive to that stuff say there's a portal. I love Miranda Lambert. She's one of my crushes. It's funny you say that, George. Miranda Lambert's fine. I don't know why that idiot left her. So let's look into... We'll look into George Dawson first. And then we'll look into the Indian, Native American, history of giants. He did pass away, it sounds like. Someone says it's a hoax. Some people say it's a hoax, some people say it's not.
Quickly before getting into the video.
Andrew, we looked at all that last night. So let's look at the mysterious death and disappearance of Andrew Dawson, who allegedly saw a giant. Bye, Sticks and idiot. You go bye-bye again. Not even doing a show on Trump. These idiots think I do a show on Trump constantly. That's why you guys gotta come check out Friday night troll show. You guys come hang out every Friday night. I'm gonna troll trolls all night long. The whole show is a troll show. The first one was a big hit. This next one's gonna be even better. I might even dress up for it to get people going.
I just want to say thank you guys for 800 subscribers in such a short amount of time. And also, if you want, I'm going to have a pinned comment in the comment section today. And right under that, you can reply to it with questions for a future Q&A. But yeah, ultimately, thank you guys. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers before the next year. Hopefully that's a goal we can reach, but we'll reach it either way, whether it be before this year or in the next year. Either way, regardless. Thank you guys, and let's get right into the video. See, what's crazy about this case is he was just a regular man. He started posting on TikTok of July 13th of 2021, and his disappearance and death will come sometime in 2022. Now, why I say that this is weird, keep and bear with me here. But in 2021, he would post random videos that would have nothing to do with any type of conspiracies that he would post, so on and so forth. He went on to post these conspiracies for about a month straight until his disappearance and speculated death of 2020. In the video you're going to see, I'm going to have to cut out the entirety of the audio from the video.
All right, Andrew, chill out.
Do this, but it's just because it has copyright claim.
Watch the video, sit back.
It was copyright claimed for no reason, so you're just going to hear some other background music I'll play for you in the video. In this video, Andrew Dawson claims to have recorded and seen a giant whilst they were driving on the road, and it's pretty obvious that whatever he was recording is a fucking massive entity of whatever it is. I'm not saying it is a giant. It could easily just be a building, and this could easily just be edited or faked, but what I'm saying is, to have it look that big from so far away, calculating the length and distance of where they're at, it would make that thing be fucking massive, at least 20 feet tall, no matter what it is. Now, I'm going to play the video for you now. Tell me what you think of it.
Yeah, that's something big from that far away. And it's moving.
Now in the video you could not hear it. All you could hear was the background music I played, but all in the actual video you hear Andrew Dawson sitting in the passenger seat while his friend drives the car down this long, lengthy road, and you hear Andrew continuously saying, "Pull over their car, there's a fucking giant up there," and the driver being unaware of what is on top of that mountain and what he's recording because he cannot see it with his naked eye, I'm assuming only through the lengthened, zoomed-in camera lens. The driver continuously asks and says, "What is it? Why would I pull over? You're lying to me. Quit bullshitting." Now, the next video is this. The next video I'm going to show you, this was posted 2 days after the original video I showed you prior was posted. He goes on to this video to mention that it's a really far away mountain, and if a helicopter company wants to sponsor him to get up there, he will, or he's going to try to get somewhere closer to view the mountain for us.
So the video is blown up. A lot of you say I have Parkinson's, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to try to go closer and find a better angle.
Madcorn,
Yeah.
salute.
Or somebody can rent me a helicopter and I'll try to find it. Or maybe blow the videos up and maybe I can get sponsored. A helicopter company can sponsor me to go up there. I don't know. But I'll try to hold the camera better. Okay? You try to hold the camera on the Zoom like that.
In the next two videos that I'm going to show, it's going to show Andrew Dawson and somebody else in a car driving to a relocated area to get closer to the mountain and get a better view.
We are on our way. We're going to go find somewhere closer. And I'm going to set my camera on something so you guys aren't complaining how shaky it is in the truck. Because, yeah, internet has no chill.
Nope.
But that's the mountain we're going to. But we're just going to try to get closer.
Friday, C. White. We do them on Friday nights.
I'm going to use this as a tripod to try to keep it steady for you guys. And it's not even there anymore, too.
It's not there anymore.
That's where it was yesterday. I spoke to some locals and it comes and goes apparently. I don't know. See, that's me trying to keep it super steady with something. There we go. Do you know how hard it is to keep it steady when zoomed in all the way?
In the next video I'm going to show you, it's going to take place where Andrew Dawson arrives home after being in a secluded area recording the mountain. And what he's going to say, he's going to make some outrageous, not outrageous so to say, but some outlandish claims that are kind of hard to believe. Bear with me in going and recording through this because there's a lot of stuff that's really unexplained within all of these lore and videos because it's just kind of all scrambled apart and a lot of it just doesn't make sense with how jumpy it is.
I just got stopped by like some CIA agents. He told me to turn around and said I'm trespassing. I said it's a public area, like a public park or whatever. Some local told me to take this path. I didn't get it on camera, but I'm going to go again tomorrow and be prepared to be filming right now because he stopped the vehicle. His truck was blocking it. Said some like environmental issue was going on. I don't know. He told me to go back and said I was trespassing. I don't get it. It was awkward, but I'm going back again tomorrow to see if he's not there. But if he is there, I will keep the camera. I will film because the only angle I could get that I found today is the one I just posted earlier, and there wasn't even anything there. But I don't understand why the road's blocked off. I don't know.
Let's quickly go through and break down what we all know so far within the Andrew Dawson lore. Number 1. We know that Andrew Dawson recorded a giant standing atop a mountain. Number 2, we know that Andrew Dawson tried to get closer and record the giant standing on the mountain. Number 3, according to some locals, the thing on the mountain comes and goes, and it will not stay there all the time, and he could not find it again. Number 4, he was allegedly stopped by the FBI or the CIA, according to him. Shortly after him getting stopped by the CIA, he's going to make a few more videos containing information about the CIA and maybe a few secrets that they withhold in him being stalked. 4 days after the actual original video of the giant video posted when he was standing on top of a mountain, 4 days after this, he posted a video of him recording 2 helicopters doing an extraction from the destination of that mountain. What they're extracting is completely unknown, and the day before that, he posted a UFO video with just a really weird blurred light, so I'm not going to add it in, especially since it just looks like a glare, but, you know, tell me what you think of this.
So they're extracting something out of here. There's 2 helicopters.
Now this chop
What
is.
the fuck?
In the next video, I'm going to show you Andrew Dawson is trying to go back to the part of the place where he was recording where he was originally kicked out due to it being private property. So as he's going back at pitch black at night, which really doesn't make much sense as why you go back there at night. You really wouldn't actually find anything, nor could you see anything with the visibility on your phone. But Andrew gets stopped by this guy, and it's a really weird interaction that I can't necessarily believe is true. It just all seems a bit played out, staged, and fake, especially if I was in that scenario of Andrew. I would probably ask for some type of authentication or identification as to why I can't travel down this public road, and it's not private.
Sure you would. Everyone says that shit. When you're under the gun and the CIA's talking to you, you're not going to ask for fucking ID. I love when people act like that. Fucking Momo. Like the CIA guy was going to give you it anyway.
Property, apparently, but I honestly, I don't know. It just seems kind of sketchy. And
The guy's here again. Yeah, this is him. What's going on?
Road's closed. Turn around.
Really?
Yeah, man. Just turn around, please.
Okay. Have a good night, man. So that was fucked up. Here he is. I'm driving past him again. Just turned around. I don't understand why it's closed off though. It's a fucking public park or public road or whatever.
This video was posted on April 17th, and basically what happens in this video is it's going to be Andrew Dawson recording a car outside of his house, parked outside staring at his house. Andrew Dawson does go out to the car to confront it, but it speeds off and drives away. The reason why the date is important and crucial to this story is the fact that it was posted on April 17th, but the weird part about this is after this video, he did not post another video until next month of May 6th.
That's the same vehicle from.
This is shady. I saw this.
This is the video that was posted on May 6th. See, the problem with this video is he's in a blank room and he starts to continue and talk about how every video that he's ever made in the past has been fake. Now, as to if he was forced to do this video or not does not make much sense at the moment, but we're going to explain why it does and does not make sense in the future in a second, but here's the clip.
Hey guys, I just want to give you an update. I'm not dead. I have not disappeared. I have just been busy with life. I couldn't get around to posting and updating you guys. So now I'm going to give you an official update of what's been going on. Sorry to disappoint you guys, but all the videos that I posted were scripted. They're just fake. They were just strictly for entertainment.
He's looking at someone.
Sorry to disappoint you guys. I just needed to give you a quick update.
10 days later, 16th of May, Andrew Dawson uploads a video explaining that all of his videos were not faked and he was forced to be silent, but he's not going to be silent about this at all. Andrew says it all in a frenzy, which kind of makes it seem extremely real, but I also don't know if it's real or not. Here's the video.
You might not see me post ever again. My videos weren't fake.
On the 17th of May, this will ultimately be Andrew Dawson's last video and last known public appearance on social media that I could ever find. In this video, it's going to show him looking at a mountain, explaining how that building that he records on this mountain was not there before, nor could I find out exactly what mountain this is, nor could I find out what exactly building that was. But ultimately, the video that he made prior to this talking about how he was forced to be silent and he cannot stay silent no longer, or something along the lines, and he wants to expose everything that they're doing, makes it even odder how this is a video that happens right after that video, but this is the last video ever made.
He could be a troll.
Andrew Dawson was announced dead, and I can't find the actual certificate of his death, nor can I find out the explanation as to why he died. All
I don't
can
think
find
it
is
is
a
either.
simple one article in Friends and Family posts about him and his death. On this, it says he died on July 1st of 2022. So according to this, he died a month and a half later after he posted that video exposing the so-called military base on top of the mountain. I personally am someone who doesn't believe that Andrew Dawson is dead, and I don't necessarily know a way to prove that he isn't dead, nor do I know a way to prove that he is dead, because family and friends posted that he did pass away, but we never got definitive proof nor an explanation as to how he died, nor a cause of death explanation, which kind of is very sketchy to the whole situation. It's hard to understand what really happened, especially since she would go from posting actual things about how she's extremely sad that her husband passed away to thirst traps right after or right before, so I'm really kind of befuddled behind how or what that could mean, because it's obvious that she's either really sad, gets a lot of likes, or really horny and loves to post a thirst trap, but you know, it is what it is. But ultimately, if you guys
This guy's kind of a prick.
explain a cause of death or the explanation to his death in an actual obituary, please let me know and send me a link to it and I'll view it. Other than that, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for 800 subscribers. Help me get to 1,000 if you want to. It's free. I'm not going to press you to do anything.
Pretty weird.
Your phone buzzes. It's a DM from a stranger. about the giant creature you saw days ago.
I want to look into him a little bit more. I think we should look into him a little bit more, just to see. I've watched a little bit on him before. I don't think the mountain where he showed the building was the same mountain, but it's hard to tell. It was snowy. And if he could have got that close to take a picture of the building up there, when he saw the giant, he should have got closer to do it. Oscar Mike, thank you for the super chat. I did not show any videos. We're not doing politics tonight, buddy. I don't want to do politics tonight. We might do it tomorrow. I need a break from politics, dude. At least for a night or two. I got to take a break from it. Not much has happened lately, but I've been getting your emails. I did not know him. I don't know if he was really unalived or not. I haven't dug into it much. But that's why we're looking into it right now. Yeah, they probably made it look like he died. I wouldn't doubt that. Do you guys want to look into it more? No, it's all good. Thank you for the super chat. I wasn't ignoring you. I just wanted a break from politics, buddy. That shit gets stupid after a while. And it's not everything I want to build my whole YouTube around. It's important, and I love Trump. I will vote Trump. He's the best candidate. But I need a break from it for a few nights. That shit gets old. And I don't want to be one of them guys with a channel. Once the election's over, no one watches. There's a lot of channels that are getting a ton of views right now talking politics. And the minute this is over, no one's going to go watch them again. Yeah, it does. It's exhausting. It gets exhausting, man. Doing all the research for it and stuff. To do it right, you got to research it. I don't just fucking come on here and talk shit. I read articles. I put a couple hours of my day into it. Christopher, salute. And I actually did research on the people that have shows based on all politics. Like that dude, what's his name, that does it, the guy that supports Kamala. Mr. Star. He's been around since like 2015 or 2018. He's only got 1.5 million views. And he's been out for like a very long time. And that's because he probably only does shit based around politics. Yeah, he's a mess. I watched that guy spread more fucking lies. I don't want to talk about it too long, but that guy, man. He was on all day today. Every time I signed on to do stuff as far as marketing and stuff like that for my channel, I had to put in some information so I could get paid. I started setting up a little bit of a store. I might start selling some merch. And he was on all day long, just like losing it. I would just like check in to see. And it was all Trump supporters in his room. And every day I check his poll just to see what's going on. And it's always Trump up by like 70%. Yeah, I'm going to start selling some merch, I think. Make some Momo t-shirts, some shit like that. Make some funny t-shirts of shit we say. But do you guys want to look into Andrew Dawson a little bit more? Or do you want to look into giants and the Native Americans? Yeah, go Yankees, salute. Yeah, it seems that way, Jet. And I do my research just to see if I'm the only channel that has shit like that. But yeah, I'm gonna look into doing a little bit of merch. If it's not so fucking crazy. I gotta see how expensive it's gonna be. I don't want you guys to get robbed buying some shit that has something I say. If I can do it where it's reasonable enough, I'll do it. But while I was doing some of that shit today, I checked on that channel. And people tell me the shit that guy says. He was trying to blame Trump for giving trillionaires and billionaires all this money. That's why they're rich. He's a fucking nut. Yeah, I don't want to hate on the guy all night long, but he's a fucking bozo. Let's keep it real. Someone wanted me to debate him, and I'm like, I couldn't even do it. He's just an unhinged nut, in my opinion. He doesn't even give people a chance. And he pulls up these graphs and these fucking things from like super left-leaning channels and shit. Yeah, I couldn't even do it. I see how he operates. I wish people would stop even watching the fucking guy, because you're just helping an idiot. It's not even worth dealing with someone like that. I mean, our minds are made up. His mind's made up. I wouldn't even bother with him. Trump is definitely not a true Republican. I wouldn't call him a Democrat, not nowadays. But that's all I'm going to talk about politics tonight. I'm done. So, where was I? What's up, malfunctioning? Indians and giants.
Today we have some more actual history from the American West in the late 1800s. We will be reading about some wars
We just
that
watched
arose
them,
between
Oscar.
the Paiute Indians when the white settlers.
Oscar Mike, you're like a day late and $1 short. I'm so sorry. We watched L.A. Marzulli tonight. We watched a bunch of stuff. The questions you asked and talked about when you just came in, you missed all of it, unfortunately. You have to go back and watch it. We looked into the Kandahar giant. We're going to look into some American giant stuff. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm going to use the restroom. I'm just going to put on the audio for now real quick. And when I get back, I'll switch it to the video. That's weird, Oscar.
Began arriving in large numbers during the 1950s. We will also hear about a war between the Paiute Indians and another tribe of red-haired cannibalistic Indians that occurred in the 15 or 1600s. We will be reading from this book, Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims, by Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins. This book was published all the way back in 1883. Sarah Winnemucca was a member of the Northern Paiute tribe. She was born near Lake Humboldt in northern Nevada in 1844. Her people were initially peaceful toward the white settlers. Sarah's grandfather was Chief Truckee. He had befriended John Fremont in his 1843 expedition, and he was very friendly toward the white settlers. He assisted the U.S. Army in the Spanish-American War. This story begins in 1858, when Chief Truckee had sent his granddaughter, Sarah Winnemucca, to live with Major William Ormsby, who led the militia of settlers near Carson City, Nevada. The author, Sarah Winnemucca, was about 14 years old at the time. She tells of the peace that lasted for a couple of years between her tribe and the white settlers, but then she tells of the breakout of war. She also tells the legend of the Paiutes' war with the red-haired Indians, who were cannibals. I will now stop writing about myself and family and tribe customs, and tell about the wars and the causes of the wars. I will jump over about 6 years. My sister and I were living at this time in Genoa with Major Ormsby's family, who took us as playmates for their little girl. While with them, we learned the English language very fast, for they were very kind to us. This was in the year 1858, I think. I am not sure. In that year, our white brothers had their houses all along Carson River. There were 21 houses there in our country. I know all the names of the people that lived in them. One man who was on the upper part of Carson River was Mr. Olds. The next man by the name of Palmer had a family. The third one by the name of Job also had a family. Another family was named Walters. Another man whose name was Dr. Daggett had no family, nor had the next one whose name was Van Sickle. The next one had more than one family. He had 2 wives and his name was Thornton. The man who lived in the next house had still more wives. There were 2 brothers, one had 3 wives and the other 5. Their name was Roos. The next man was named Knott and had no family. The next house had 3 brothers named Sides.
This is
with
wild.
No families. The next man was named Gilbert and had no family. The next was named Aldridge and had a family. Then came our friend, Major Ormsby. Next came Adams and brothers, who had no wives. Then Jones and family, Miller and family, Brown with no family, Elsie with no family, Mr. Ellis and family, Williams brothers no family, Mr. Cole and family, Mr. Black and family at Humboldt Lake. All these white people were loved by my people. We lived there together and were as happy as could be. There was no stealing. No one lost their cattle or horses. My people had not learned to steal. We lived that way in peace for another year. Our white brothers gave my people guns for their horses in the way of trading. Yet my people never said, "We want you to give us something for our lands." Now there are a great many of our white brothers everywhere through our country, and mines or farms here and there. The Mormons came in a great many wagons and settled down in Carson Valley, where now stands the great Carson City, as it is called. The following year, 1859, we were yet living with Major Ormsby, and Mother and Father were down at Pyramid Lake with all our people. So Sister and I were all alone there with our dear good friend, Major Ormsby. Late that fall...
Fucking assholes.
When you hear the word Lovelock, do you think of giant red-haired cannibals? You should. I'm Aiden Mattis, and welcome back to the Lore Lodge. Of looking at things from both sides, I'd like to introduce our sponsor for today's video, Ground News. Ground News is a symbol to approach issues, and while whites are the largest racial demographic, Native Americans are the second largest at 7.14%. The town was established in 1866 when an Englishman by the name of George Lovelock arrived and bought the squatters' rights to about 320 acres of land around the Humboldt. In this case, when we say the Humboldt, there are a few things we could be referring to. Those are the river, the lake, and the sink. And I don't totally understand what a sink is, but to my limited knowledge, the way this works is that sometimes it's a lake or it used to be a lake. But the important ones here are Humboldt Lake and Humboldt River. Though there is an important sink, and that one is Carson. Interesting little fact about George Lovelock Sr., the man who settled Lovelock, Nevada, is that he was born in Wales to English parents, but all of his siblings seemed to yearn for adventure. One of his brothers moved to Australia, another to New Zealand, and of course Lovelock to California and then Nevada. The town began to experience growth for the first time in 1868 when Lovelock sold about 85 acres to the Central Pacific Railroad. This led to the town becoming a small but still important mining site. Lovelock himself, seeing exactly how profitable this entire venture could be, started investing in hotels, saloons, casinos, those kinds of things around town to entertain and attract more workers. More workers meant more mines meant more profits, and one such mine was in a little place called Lovelock Cave. And, they weren't looking for gold there, it was more bat guano, but you know what? Everything has its purpose. But while the cave may have an unassuming appearance, you may have heard the stories of the red-haired man-eating giants that the Paiute once fought, known as the Site-Ka of Lovelock Cave, colloquially on the internet. According to the folk tales you'll hear on the internet, the giants of Lovelock Cave were anything from 9 to 15 feet tall. They were the scourge of these ancient Paiutes or ancient Native Americans, perhaps even predating them. They would terrorize the countryside, abduct people, trap them. It was just not really a good time to be a person around Lovelock Cave. As the legend goes, or at least the version of it you'll hear on TikTok or the Instagram reels, the natives eventually became so fed up with this giant menace that they drove them into a cave, threw all sorts of wood and brush into it, and then lit it on fire, shooting arrows at them anytime they tried to get out. And eventually, this was how they destroyed the last of these red-haired giants. This has been compared to all sorts of other legends, anything from the Wendigo, because it involves cannibalism, up through the Nephilim, because they're giants who seem to predate the presence of man in the area. But these stories obviously didn't originate on the internet recently, but they also don't come from the miners or from Lovelock. These are stories told by the Northern Paiute, and long before George Lovelock ever put down roots in Lovelock, Nevada, that territory belonged to a collection of Northern Paiute tribes. The Northern Paiute, of course, don't call themselves the Northern Paiute. They have all sorts of different, very specific band names, usually named after whatever the primary food or some sort of unique food eaten by that group is. As a general nation, they call themselves the Numu, or the people. These Northern Paiute are, of course, related to the broader Numic-speaking people group that inhabits the Great Basin area of the western United States. This includes groups like the Comanche, the Shoshone, the Ute, and the Southern Paiute. And of course, there are a number of other groups that still fit within this family. They primarily inhabited the dry deserts of California and Nevada, reaching up into eastern Oregon and western Idaho as well, and typically following animals from water source to water source as they hunted. This was a semi-nomadic group of people. The Northern Paiute were frequently involved in wars with other non-Numic-speaking groups in the area, and these primarily included groups like the Pitt River, the Klamath, and the Washoe. Relations with the Shoshone, relatives of the Paiute, were generally peaceful. The arrival of European Americans created an entirely new set of challenges for the Northern Paiute, including disease and competition for resources as the population of the region rapidly expanded. American settlers began knocking on the door of Paiute territory in the 1840s, and by the 1860s, it had reached a point where this was a pretty serious competition. And it became so intense that a series of wars broke out throughout the 1860s. Though the Paiute and the settlers had initially aligned themselves against the Pitt River Indians, the alleged murder of a white man by a Paiute man threw all of that into turmoil. There had been an agreement between the settlers and the Paiute that any crime committed against either side would be punished. They would bring whoever did it to the authorities, and it would not matter. The Paiute would not protect Paiute, the whites would not protect whites. If you committed a crime, you were punished, that was it. Now, that agreement had been made by a chieftain named Numaga, and Numaga was generally in control of the situation, but there were breakaway groups, which included the Smoke Creek Paiute. They did not approve of these peaceable relations, they did not approve of Chieftain Numaga's leadership overall, and they decided they were going to agitate a little bit. This incident put Numaga in a difficult position. He could protect the Paiute man, who was a member of what was essentially a rebel cell. The natives, of course, didn't really think of it that way. But if he were to allow for one of his own to go and be handed over to people who were likely going to execute him, it would not look good within the tribe. However, if he didn't hand over the man for trial, then that could cause problems with the very, very powerful United States government. Numaga was an intelligent and well-educated man. He knew, looking east, that that entire land had once been peopled by his own. They may not have been Paiute just like him, but they certainly weren't the white man. He knew that to cross the United States was not something that typically ended well for the Indian. In the end, Numaga decided that he was unwilling to admit that a murder had occurred by one of his own, or deny that the murderer was one of his own. And he would not be unclear precisely why he'd made this decision, but Numaga did go so far as to tell the settlers that he would...
Con, keep the door. All the research we done has these people from 8 feet to 15 feet tall.
Not hand over any native who committed a crime or was accused of a crime. He would only hand them over to the authorities if the crime was committed against a Paiute. This violated the agreement, and both sides left that meeting knowing war was possible. Numaga gathered a council, as was the custom of the Paiute, and himself voted against.
I wish all the lefties were in here to hear this story. I don't know how many people on the left I've argued with that they tell me I'm lying, that native tribes used to battle with each other. They think all Indians just loved each other. They're fucking nuts. But I digress.
War. By the Paiute custom, a unanimous decision was required by the War Council, and so they went into deliberation. During the debates, however, 2 Paiute children were reported missing, and allegedly, the white men were to blame. The story went that a young Paiute man had made a trade. He had given a horse to some settlers at Carson Station, and they had, of course, given him in turn a gun, but the gun didn't work. An argument ensued in which he was unhappy about being tricked into buying a bad gun. A dog bit him, the settlers laughed, and he got very upset. The boy returned to the tribe and told them about the deal gone wrong and that he had been cheated out of his horse, and added in the detail that during the argument he had heard Paiute voices coming from the root cellar, and they were young Paiute voices. Having received information that the settlers had captured 2 of their own children, the deliberations were over. The Paiute were going to war. A raiding party rode to Williams Station, which was a stop along the Pony Express, and there they killed 5 people. 2 of those people were brothers of the William who owned the station, and the other 3 were just employees of the station, I believe 1 man and 2 women. And according to the Paiute version of this story, they did rescue 2 children. The settlers, on the other hand, claimed the entire thing was made up, there were no children, and this was just a reason for this level of reprisal against what was really not that big of a deal, even though it was wrong. Essentially, the argument was, you guys needed a reason to kill 5 people over a bad deal. We will likely never know if there were Paiute children in that root cellar, but what we do know is that the resulting series of conflicts saw the northern Paiute nation essentially destroyed. Defeated, the remaining Paiute were relegated to reservations at Pyramid Lake and Duck Valley. Westward expansion saw the end of the Paiute way of life, and most of them transitioned into more traditionally American styles of living. They took up careers in ranching, farming, entrepreneurship, and the like. But in the eras before the white man came, they faced an entirely different and yet still foreign threat. There had been tradition and folk tales about these Siteka for a very long time within the northern Paiute tribes, but they first made their way into a more mainstream narrative of events in 1911. In that year, David Pugh and James Hart were mining guano out of the cave. This would be sold as fertilizer elsewhere in the country, and it was just a decent way to make a living. And the way they did this was they dug guano out of the upper deposits of the cave, then brought out to the hillside, screened it through a 3/4 inch sieve, and anything that got stuck in that sieve just got tossed. The remaining sorted back guano would then be shipped off to a fertilizer company in San Francisco. But while screening, they came across a number of Native American artifacts, and they recognized these for what they were, but the stuff that was small and uninteresting, they just kind of tossed into the refuse pile, and the nice, well-preserved, interesting stuff, they tried to give to the Smithsonian, just out of the good of their hearts for the betterment of the field. Instead, they wanted money, and the Smithsonian wasn't buying, they were only accepting donations. That meant that private collectors were the people who got things. And a few things did end up in museums due to the careful, watchful eyes of curators. But about 20 feet back in the cave, buried under 4 feet of guano, things got interesting. It was the mummified body of a 6 foot 6 inch tall man, and it wasn't the only mummified body in the cave. There were another 4 or 5 female skeletons that they found. And interestingly, a grass rope about 8 feet long was tied around his neck and knotted behind the ear. He was also bound in ropes from his ankles up to his knees, and his entire body was mummified with the exception of his abdomen. All of the remains had distinctly red hair, and the women were wearing tall moccasins, and 2 or 3 of them had either buckskin coats or some sort of other robe. By 1912, the layer of artifacts had gotten so thick that it was more artifacts than usable guano, so they kind of decided this was the point at which, you know what, we can get nothing out of this cave anymore, Let's now let the big brain people come in. So, Hart and Pugh contacted the University of California. The University of California was extraordinarily excited about this archaeological find, but the problem was that A.L. Kreber, the man in charge of the anthropology and archaeology department at the time, did not have any available archaeologists to send on short notice. So he took the next best thing and hired Ben Stiller from Night at the Museum. You might think I'm joking, but he actually did hire Llewellyn L. Loud, who was a guard at the museum. Loud had no formal training, but he was an intelligent man, and he was given a set of instructions and told, I need this from you. And it's important to remember that archaeology in 1912 and archaeology in 2023 are a bit different. It was still scientific back then, but it wasn't quite as scientific as it is today. The idea of sending off a security guard to a sensitive ancient Native American burial site now is unconscionable. But 110 years ago, it wasn't taken quite as seriously. Essentially, this was the best that they could do to be the first ones to the site. When Loud arrived at the cave, he found a number of rushes made of tulle, some grass items, and just various Native American artifacts. He spent 4 months digging in lots, not the typical grid structure, as again, he was not an actual trained archaeologist, he was just doing his best, but he managed to produce enough rough but usable data to begin forming a general idea of what was going on at this cave. Unfortunately, the stratigraphy of the cave was very poor. He did not properly go layer by layer in a grid to figure out what was actually from each cultural level. Instead, he dug in wide, sort of arbitrary lots, as he called them, and recorded everything he found in them. So for the time, all this really told archaeologists were there were people there, and they could kind of date the cave's use based on other dates they knew and how similar the artifacts were to things from other sites. But for reasons known only to God and Mr. Kreber, they decided that Llewellyn Loud should be the person to write the report on the Lovelock cave site. It could be that there weren't many archaeologists who wanted to attach their name to a site that contaminated. Unfortunately, when Loud did finally publish the paper in 1929, he did not explain how he actually did anything. He just dedicated one paragraph to methodology, and it was not detailed. What is known is that in 1912, that cave contained some baskets, rushes, clothes, duck decoys, very old duck decoys, I believe the oldest ever found in America, and some skeletons, one of which was rather large. Obviously, absent any written record, and with an archaeological site that is not going to be super helpful with determining age, and prior to radiocarbon dating, the best way that they could get an idea of what actually happened here, what it was used for, was through the oral traditions of the local indigenous people. Lovelock Cave has, so far as modern archaeologists are concerned, been in...
So basically, the guy they hired fucked up everything. Well, they said he did. By the sounds of it, based on what they said, allegedly, he didn't go about it the right way. He just dug up big chunks. He didn't do it in layers, how sediment settles throughout years. So they discredited him. But we're going to hear what the native account is now.
Inhabited for about 3,500 years, beginning around 1500 BC. It may have been used as a shelter prior to that, but there's no evidence of long-term occupation. And this is a very interesting cave, because its use didn't cease after the Little Ice Age, nor did it cease after Europeans arrived on the shores, and it seems that that cave was in use all the way up until the Paiute sort of were forced to abandon the area by American settlement. The youngest items found there were a cache of guns from 1850, and it seemed like they had not been left there by the people using the cave. Or at least not the people who had traditionally been using the cave. They seem to have been gone by 1835. But if legend is to be believed, that cave was not abandoned for the first time in 1835. Sometime in the distant past, according to the Paiute, they were not the only people there. And a woman named Sarah Winnemucca wrote about the Paiute history and the Paiute in the time she lived around 1883. In her book, Life Among the Paiute, Sarah Winnemucca talked of a small tribe of barbarians that lived around her people. According to her, this band of barbarians lived along the Humboldt River. The exact time period for this conflict is uncertain. Winnemucca says that it was both many hundred years ago, and that it occurred in the time of her third or fifth great-grandfather. That could be anywhere from 150 to 300 years, and many hundred years ago is even more broad. It certainly did not happen during Sarah Winnemucca's time, nor did it happen during her father or her grandfather's time. Though both young Winnemucca, known as Badface, as well as old Winnemucca, were extremely important figures in Paiute history, neither of them recalled anything about being involved in this. If Winnemucca's dating of between her third and fifth great-grandfathers is correct, then that would put this sometime in the late 1500s, anywhere into the 1600s. These barbarians are given no tribal name by Winnemucca. They're simply known as the barbarians. But it is clear that these are the Site Ka, the giant red-haired cannibals who have been terrorizing the Paiute, or at least as we understand them in the modern...
Sounds very similar to the Kandahar giant and what we hear about in Afghanistan. Let's not forget, that's an exact description of the giants in Afghanistan.
Version of things. Sarah's version's a little different, and we'll get to that name, Site Ka, in a little bit, don't worry. And these weren't just cannibals who lived somewhere off in the distance, and if you wandered into their hidden lair deep within the woods, you'd be a meal. No, these guys were coming down into Paiute territory and kidnapping Paiutes. They were laying traps along Paiute trails. They were even, according to her, digging up dead Paiutes to eat them. In fact, they were so bloodthirsty that according to Sarah Winnemucca, they would even eat their own dead. Now, occasionally there would be open war between Sarah's people and these barbarians, but it eventually all came to a head in one particular 3-year-long war. Now, throughout her story, Winnemucca uses the term my people to talk about the Paiute. But her specific people, her band, they were called the Koyidika. And I'm, again, trying so hard it might be Kwiwi. So as not to further offend any Paiute who might be watching, I'm just going to refer to them as the Fish Eaters, which is the English translation of the name. They lived by Pyramid Lake, about 45 miles to the west of Humboldt Lake, which is, of course, where we're talking about the Site Ka. Sarah also tells us that before this war occurred, they had tried to actually bring in some of these barbarians and rehabilitate them, make it so that they could live the Paiute way of life and not the eating people way. But according to her, all of this failed. And when we look at a lot of Native American tribes and stories, we do tend to see a trend that cannibalism is sort of seen as this uncurable taboo. If you commit the act of cannibalism, then you will forever be a cannibal. You're not reformable. Obviously, in this case, they thought maybe we can reform some of them. And then you have other situations like the Wechuge, the Wendigo, where there is no fixing it. It seems that in this case, taking some of them in and trying to prevent them from eating people only to have them do it anyway was kind of the point at which they said there's no cure. And according to Winnemucca, these were incredibly agile and brave warriors. She recounts how the Paiute would fire volleys of arrows at them, and they would simply jump into the air, grab the arrows, and shoot them right back. At the start of the war, it said that there were 2,600 of the barbarians, whereas the number of Paiute isn't given. Considering the much greater size of the Paiute nation, it's possible there were a lot more, but this may have been a localized band-to-band conflict as well. Over the course of 3 years, the Paiute whittled this population down to a fraction of its former number, and the few survivors went to hide on Humboldt Lake. And I mean on. They built rafts out of tulle, which is a type of cattail, and they sailed out into the lake. But they didn't have enough provisions to be on the water, and they were surrounded by Paiutes, who every time any of the Site Ka would try to land, the Paiutes would shoot them. One night, they were able to land on the eastern edge of the lake, get everybody off, and go hide up in a cave. The Paiute weren't able to stop them getting out of the lake, but they were able to track them to their final location. The Paiute were relentless, firing arrow after arrow every single time somebody tried to leave the cave. If they went for water, they figured this was the only way out because people kept trying to come out that entrance. And periodically, they would yell out to the barbarians and say, hey, if you guys just give up eating people, we'll be fine. We can be chill. We'll let you live. And according to them, they just didn't respond. The barbarians said nothing back, and they figured this was either them being defiant or they were so deep inside the cave that they couldn't hear them. But in Winnemucca's account, she does suggest that these people were basically choosing cannibalism over life. But here we get a very important and interesting piece of information about the things we're dealing with. While they're typically presented as giant cannibals, inhuman monsters with the complexion of an Irishman, here we're told that they speak the Paiute tongue. And alongside this, she mentions none of the other supernatural characteristics. According to her, these are just barbarians who eat people, and they speak Paiute. Now,
they could be Nephilim.
Paiute for a long time, as she said. It seems perfectly reasonable that being a small minority within a much larger majority nation, you would learn the lingua franca. The fact that these barbarians are capable of speaking a human language and are not described with any other supernatural characteristics implies that what we're dealing with here is not the valiant slaying of supernatural evil creatures and monsters, but genocide. Because receiving no answer and assuming that these people are irredeemable, they set fire to the cave. They pile wood inside of it. They actually pile it at the entrance to like form a barricade, but according to them, the Ka just keep pulling the wood inside, and then so they just light it on fire to smoke them out, but instead they all die. Or at least it's believed that they all died because when the Paiute went back to check and see if anybody was still in the cave or had come out, it was still smoldering and there was a horrific stench that they assumed must be dead bodies. Thereafter, they were called Sedu Kara by their neighbors, which, according to Sarah, means enemy or conqueror. Interestingly enough, this story is not too different from the Yosemite story. We talked about that one in our Stacey Aris video, but essentially, the Yosemite were known as they are killers by their neighbors. They claimed it's because they killed grizzly bears. Their neighbors had other ideas. This could be a case of the Paiute being called the conquerors by their neighbors, not because they defeated the evil cannibal giants, but because they were a warlike and invasive people. Which, if you ask the Pitt River, the Klamath, and the Washoe, you'll probably hear that, yeah, the northern Paiute were a rather warlike people. There's a little bit more on that coming later, but we'll get there. Now, if Sarah Winnemucca were the only person to recount this story, you might just roll your eyes and say, okay, well, this is just fantastical. But she's not. Another version passes down to us through mining engineer John T. Reed, who got his version of the story from Sarah's brother, Natchez. When actual archaeologist Mark Harrington and Llewellyn Loud went back in 1924 to revise their expedition, they got some more stories. Now, this Captain Natchez was obviously the brother of Sarah Winnemucca, but also either the brother or the cousin of Chieftain Numaga, who of course was very important during the 1860s. In Reed's account, he tells that Natchez told them of the great calamity which had occurred in that cave to another race of people who had been exterminated by the Paiutes. So we're told off the bat that this is another race. So the Paiute might simply be saying that these aren't Paiute, they might be saying these aren't Numic, they might also be saying these aren't Indians. And just to clarify, in the source material, they do use the term Indians, and even the Native Americans are doing this when it applies to everybody from the North American continent. If they're talking about a specific nation, they say the nation name. If they're talking about a specific tribe, tribal name, specific band name. It just really depends on how generalized they're trying to be. According to him, 4 or 5 generations back, the Paiute fought this great war against a group of strange Indians. He says that this was a race of people with red hair all over their bodies. He said that this race of red-haired people also spoke the Northern Paiute language, and that it was they wiped them out. No reason for the conflict was given by Natchez, but Reed surmised that it probably wasn't cannibalism, as Sarah had claimed, because that wasn't compatible with the idea of trying to bring them into your own home. And on the other hand, Reed was not much of an ethnologist. He was a mining engineer, so he might have simply not understood the dynamics of Native American tribes. He had heard another account from a woman named Annie Lowry, who was half Native, half white, and she said that it was a battle over resources, but genocidal conflict over stealing some rice and kidnapping a couple of women seems a little bit of a stretch. As for Reed, his best guess was that this was an issue of scarcity, that this was that the Paiute needed food, and the cannibals needed food, may not have even been cannibals, might have just been another tribe of Native Americans, and the Paiute decided to just wipe them out, and this is a legend that arose to explain that. Unfortunately, for most of Reed's story, it's just limited versions of Winnemucca's story, but there are some new details added. Natchez said that the Ka came to Lovelock Cave from the southwest after some fighting along the Carson River. Now, this is a little difficult because the Carson River isn't southwest of Humboldt Lake for a long while, but it is southeast of Humboldt Lake, as is Carson Sink. He says that this group of people had been driven northwards by fighting other Paiute further south and eventually just reached their end at Lovelock. Reed has heard a number of different accounts here, and he comes to the conclusion, based on all he heard, that whoever the Paiute were fighting here had probably been there since before them. So as we can see with this story, even down to simple details like where did these people come from are very murky. Natchez further explained that after driving them into the cave, his people piled sagebrush at the entrance.
They burnt the shit out of it.
Cave, they would pile more sagebrush, and then eventually they lit it on fire and smoked everybody out. Any who attempt to escape were shot with arrows. These details about people actually managing to escape, as well as where they may have come from, are not present in Winnemucca's account. And then a few more renditions can be found. One of them I got from the Lovelock Paiute tribe. The Lovelock Paiute tribe is a colony of descendants who live in the town of Lovelock in what is technically, I believe, its own municipality. It consists of 3 streets and a little over 24 houses, as well as a tribal administration building. The people who live within this colony consider themselves the descendants of the Paiute who lived in Lovelock up until white settlement and then returned. Among stories about how George Lovelock Sr. was very kind to the natives and they were all very good friends who would feed the native children fruit, and how the people lived back then and all of that, they tell a story about this weird little thing that happened. This is something that happened at a time before the white settlers to the Paiute, who call themselves Numu, and it was wrought upon them by strange Indians. It says that the Paiute of Lovelock were called the Kuptakutta, or the ground squirrel eaters. They were related to the Kwiwi of Pyramid Lake, the people of Sarah-Winnemucca, but they were not related to the strange Indians, to whom they referred as Numa Takutta. Now, as I mentioned, the way many Paiute band names worked was that you had what they eat, and they are that eaters. Coop, ground squirrel, Takutta, ground squirrel eater. Kwiwi Takutta, fish eater. Numa Takutta, man eater. And these Numa Takutta, man eaters, are described as being tall with red hair covering their entire bodies. Now, that could just mean that they had thicker arm hair and body hair than the natives themselves. We could also be looking at something really hairy in the sense that Europeans tend to think of it like Bigfoot. According to the Lovelock Paiute, it was these Kuptakutta who fought off the Site Ka, the cannibals. But this detail is excluded by Winnemucca. There may be an explanation for that, however, because Winnemucca's father was a chief. According to her, in Life Among the Paiutes, she describes him as being the head chief of the Paiute. Some historians have argued that this was a position where he was the head chief, he was in charge of all the northern Paiute, but others have suggested that it was more of a first among equals position, like the Pope before the schism. Either way, he would have been a very influential man in the Pyramid Lake region. So it may be that Winnemucca wasn't suggesting that it was her people specifically, the Kwiwi, but rather that it was all her people, the Paiute. Aside from the tribal name details differing between the account from the Paiute Lovelock tribe as well as the Winnemucca account, there's basically the same story after that point. The Kuptakutta chase them off the lake, they chase them up into the cave, they stack wood, they burn the wood, and that's the end of it. So when you look at the Native American version of events, and we take a step back from the fun internet stuff that we love to talk about, and we look at what do the Native Americans actually say about the Site Ka. Let's start with giants. They're described as tall, yes, but not necessarily as giant, and it seems like much of the whole thing with giants may have come from the finding of that 6 foot 6 inch tall mummy. Now, 6 feet 6 inches tall is a very tall person. It is an especially tall person anywhere beyond 200 years ago, but it's not an extraordinarily large person. If you're going to use the term giant to mean something supernatural, to mean anything beyond like, wow, that's a giant watermelon, you're going to need to be pretty specific here. We can't be talking about people who are within the normal range of human height. To call something a tribe of giants, you're going to need more than one guy who looks like he probably could have started in the Italian league. One Division II basketball player does not a giant race make. And neither Winnemucca nor Natchez describe these things as being gigantic. Nor do Reed or Loud or Harrington or any of the people who were studying this, as well as the people who have done it more recently, they don't really come across any versions of it. They never say giant. They might talk about the exact size of a body, but you don't have them throwing that word around. The one account that I did find that called them giants from a Native American source didn't even call them giants, it called them tall. The red hair aspect, you're watching this within the first week after it came out, you cannot watch yet. But if you're watching this more than a week after Friday, September 8th, then
Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Just to say where them bones went, the fucking research was gaffed. The guy hired a fucking security guard to go dig up the bones. God knows what they grabbed, what they didn't. Every time I research things, I feel like I'm left with more questions than answers. But I find it odd that it's always a red-haired, usually a red-haired giant. In my research of it, anyway. And I want to look up some giant skeletons before we call it a night. And I'm sure they suppress. I'm sure a lot of this shit is suppressed. I'm sure whatever we know, we don't know fucking shit. Pardon my French, but I think the Smithsonian has hidden a lot of this shit. Possibly Outcast. Yeah, if you ask a liberal white. But let's look into some archaeological giant bones that have been found. We haven't looked at any bones that have been found yet. And I think if we're going to look into giants, we need to look into some of the bones that have been found. We'd be doing a huge disservice if we didn't. And the reason I do these is to make people think. I think the government does, yeah. Without a doubt. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't.
Of Saudi Arabian desert. A recent gas exploration activity in the Saudi Arabian desert uncovered the ancient skeletal remains of humans of a phenomenal size. Archaeologists are conducting various studies to find out the true facts relating to these skeletons' origin. However, local people and religious scholars link these gigantic skeletons to a story mentioned in the Holy Quran. The story states that God created a race of tall, big, and powerful people who could put their arm around big tree trunks and break them. This race was named Ad. This powerful race later turned against God, and they were destroyed. Giant skeleton of India. Could there have been a race of giants in India? Well, crowds flocked to an archaeological site where a group of explorers unearthed the skeletal remains of a human of phenomenal size. Measuring 18 feet in height, this must be the tallest human skeleton in India. Entire explorations was supported by National Geographic. Experts believe that the giant skeleton was part of remains of ancient people who were created with phenomenal size. Red-haired giants. Archaeologists found remains of red-haired giants in Lovelock, Nevada. Lovelock Cave was first discovered in Nevada in 1913. In the cave, miners found buried treasures, artifacts, and remains of what appeared to be red-haired giants.
That skull's not normal.
The Sitaka are thought to be a legendary tribe of red-haired cannibalistic giants. Miners in Lovelock Cave also found mummified remains of a man having a height of around 6 feet. All of these instances are proof that there was a time when giants did live on Earth. The footprint of God. In addition to skeletal remains, another thing that proves giant people did exist are footprints. Nearly 100 years ago, a giant footprint was found by a hunter in South Africa. Locals nicknamed it the footprint of God. The footprint was 1.2 meters long, and according to estimates,
no doubt about it,
must have stood 27 feet tall. There are no marks or carvings on the rock indicating that the rock was stepped on while it was in molten form. Estimated to be 3 billion years old, the footprint cannot be of a modern human because at the time, life on Earth was in microscopic stages. West Virginia giants. In ancient burial mounds of West Virginia, a number of giant skeletons have been found. Some of these ancient giant skeletons were also found in the early days of coal mining. More were discovered when the ground was later being excavated for other purposes. Also, in 1838, when archaeologists were excavating the Great Creek Mound, which is in present-day Moundsville, West Virginia, they found mysterious giant human skeletons. These skeletons of giants measured a staggering 8 feet in length. Giant skeletons of Ecuador. Legends talk of a city of giants located in Ecuador, deep within the Amazon rainforest. Researchers discovered megalithic structures and pyramids that stood 260 feet tall and 260 feet wide. These structures were built with huge stones weighing about 2 tons each. Initially, explorers concluded that the huge stone structures were natural. Later in the year 1964, locals discovered abnormally large bones, including a shin bone that looked like it belonged to a very tall human being. This led archaeologists to conclude that giants had actually lived in the area. Vampire skeleton of Bulgaria. Next up, we take you to Bulgaria for a discovery that will give you goosebumps. Can you imagine seeing someone stabbing the heart of a dead person to counter the fear that the corpse might return to feast on human blood? I'm sure you can. But have a look at this story. During excavations near the Black Sea, a group of Bulgarian archaeologists found remains of several medieval giants. The massive skeletons were pierced through the chest with iron rods, supposedly to stop them from turning into vampires. This scary story illustrates a pagan practice that was common in villages centuries ago. Bhima's stove. You will be amazed by this story from India that proves the existence of giants. This is Bhima's stove. The monument is placed at Pancharathas complex, in Mahabalipuram, India. Geologists and archaeologists believe the rock arrangement isn't a natural formation. Rather, it must have been arranged by a giant called Bhima. It is believed that Bhima was 12 feet tall. Bhima used to set up fire beneath the metallic cooking pot. To this day, the underside of the pot has soot remains on it. According to local legends, Bhima was granted invincible strength when he met the reptilian. Giants of Death Valley. Giant bodies were found in an underground network of tunnels in Death Valley. The bodies were found with remains of prehistoric animals, precious items, and huge weapons. The giant human skeletons were 9 feet tall and about 80,000 years old. A newspaper in San Diego first reported the news in 1947, but the story along with the giant remains seemed to have disappeared in thin air. How could such a historic discovery just fade away? What a strange world indeed. The Serpent Mound. In 1894, an Ohio farmer was hunting foxes when he stumbled upon something of major archaeological interest. He discovered graves that contained ancient giants. The graves were located in Hillsboro, Ohio. Interestingly, the graves were right next to a serpent mound. When scientists looked into the graves, they found large-sized bones and other body parts. Many believe that these graves are the same graves that have been cited in the biblical account called the Nephilim. Some people believe that the whole story is a plain hoax. The Bible. It would be a rational position to take if we said that biblical evidence isn't worth much. Nevertheless, many historians have used the Bible for various references. When it comes to our topic, the Bible is a good example, for it states that giants have existed since the times of the Old Testament. For instance, it narrates the story of the big Goliath, whom David defeated with a stone and a sling. Giant ape tooth. A German scientist visited an apothecary in Hong Kong looking for dragon teeth. During his visit, he stumbled upon a large molar in a dusty drawer of trinkets. The most interesting fact is that the tooth did not belong to a dragon or an ape. Rather, it was evidence in the existence of a gigantic creature called a pithecus. The pithecus is the largest species of primate ever discovered and is believed to have partial human origins. Members of this species stood about 10 feet tall and weighed 1,200 pounds. The tooth found by the German scientist dated back 9 million to 100,000 million years. This story kind of reminds one of King Kong, doesn't it? Mexican giants. In March 2015, a photo went viral on social media showing gigantic human skulls. These skulls were allegedly unearthed in a small village in Sierra de Tapalapa in southern Mexico. It was later revealed that the picture wasn't authentic. It was a graphic artist's work. Nevertheless, the picture did spark a discussion about a giant race known as Quinametzin that supposedly roamed Mexico. 20 feet tall Zehua and 10 feet tall Tilcazin were said to be members of this family. An amazing discovery indeed. Mysterious giant skeleton. In the Krasnodar region of northern Caucasus, a team of Russian archaeologists made a wonderful discovery. While excavating a historical site, they found the bones of giants. The bones are believed to be the remains of ancient people belonging in the Bronze Age who lived about 4,000 years ago. Archaeologists revealed that the male skeletons measured a full 2 meters in height, while female skeletons measured approximately 1.7 meters. The Giant of Ohio. This is a giant story from Ohio. Workmen engaged in excavating a cellar located on Webster Street across from a mammoth skeleton one day. The large-sized skeleton clearly indicated that the human to whom the skeleton belonged was of a giant stature. The skeleton measured 7 feet in height. Most of the bones of this gigantic skeleton crumbled as soon as they were exposed to the air. Hence, archaeologists were not able to ascertain whether it was of American origin or Indian origin. One thing is certain, the remains must have been interred a long, long time ago. The giant skull of a cyclops.
What the
first,
fuck?
do us a favor. Click that like button to inspire us. Subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell and you won't miss any interesting video. Across something that was completely out of the ordinary. An enormous skull with the socket of a single eye was
Yeah, what the
discovered.
fuck is that?
grotesque
Looks
looking
like
skull
Predator.
belonged to a massive monster. Archaeologists linked the skull
That fucking skull looked like Predator.
men suddenly came across something that was completely out of the ordinary. An enormous skull with the socket of a single eye was discovered. The grotesque-looking skull belonged to a
How
massive
cool.
monster. Archaeologists linked the skeleton to a huge mammal giant called a cyclop that only had one red eye. It was estimated that this cyclop was 6 feet tall and weighed 6 tons. This intriguing fossil was estimated to be at least 3 million years old. The famous giant of Outso. Recently, researchers unearthed remains of a famous giant known as Miguel Joaquin Elguisi. Miguel is considered an important historical figure. He traveled throughout Europe in the 19th century and met with royalties like Queen Victoria. It is believed that Miguel was born with gigantism. As a grown man, he stood 7 feet tall and weighed 470 pounds. After his death in 1861, his remains were interred in a cemetery in Outso, Spain. Surprisingly, his skeletons, which were long thought to have been stolen, were later found in the same cemetery where he was originally buried. Unique giant skeleton in Thailand. A huge ancient humanoid skeleton was found in a cave in Krabi, Thailand. The skeleton was a male and measured about 6 meters. However, the most amazing
Holy
fact
shit.
about this skeleton is that next to the giant skeleton were found remains of a serpent. It is said that the giant skeleton must have been killed by a horned snake in a cave. This discovery sparked widespread public curiosity. It left people wondering whether snakes sneak into graves to feast on the dead. Which of these discoveries was the most amazing? Do you think giants exist?
Interesting. I find all this shit fascinating. I wouldn't doubt that they existed at some level. The last one they found that we just showed was measured at 18 meters and had a serpent wrapped around it. Wild. And I wouldn't, they suppress all this shit, I'm sure. Wow, we got some weird shit going on in the chat. If a person dies of you-know-what, the you-know-what transmitter never dissipates, and the you-know-what contaminates the soil. How do you know that, personal? I didn't know that, Diane. Give me some resources, personal. How do you know all this stuff? You spew a lot of shit, so it makes me curious. Let's check out our poll. 66% of people think giants existed. What do you do for a living, personal NA? That makes you an expert on the vid. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. We're looking into giants tonight, something different. You say this stuff night after night, but how do you know it? I'm not saying you're wrong, but how do you know these things? I know they have research labs, but to say a shark was made in a lab sounds wild. They were like the most prehistoric creature on Earth, dude. So I gotta beg to differ. How do you know this personal? Shocks were made in a lab. Allegedly, shocks have been here for millions of years. Sounds strange, dude. We're not even talking about the shit this guy always wants to talk about. He's talking about cannibals. He's just go all over the fucking place. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Yeah, Megalodon. He probably screwed. You study a lot. You read a lot. You learn psychology case study in 3rd grade. You're abducted by aliens. Your brain was rewired. How old are you, personal? What do you do for a living? Sound like a troll. Unbelievable. I like to give people a chance to hang out and investigate stuff. But you're acting strange, dude. Is it me, guys? Is it just me? Oh my goodness. It's probably why people are bouncing. That's why people leave, because they're idiots. They don't want to hear the bullshit in the chat. That's why I cut people off that are trolls. Like, I don't believe fucking shocks were made in the lab. Enough. Matter of fact, you're going bye-bye. Because you're talking about all kinds of shit that is retarded. Craziness. Talking about giants. He's talking about Nazis. He's talking about this. He's talking about that. Talking about cannibals. How God likes human sacrifice. It's probably fucking Carl that called in that night and got everyone all sketched out on the phone. Oh, shit. But we looked into giants a little bit tonight. Pretty interesting. I don't know what to believe. It's a little bit of both yet. But I don't know if I'm sold on giants. I'm a little bit, after watching some of the evidence tonight, I'm not sure I believe in them as much as I used to. Maybe they used to exist. I don't know. It's tough to say. Some of the information was very, seemed like it could be true. But when you see some of the heights of them, by today's standards, we have guys in the NBA that are that tall. And then on the other end of it, they find a skeleton 18 feet tall in Indo-Pacific China. So it's hard to say. These are the things that make me wonder what the fuck we live in, what is going on with Earth. I hear you, crispy critter, exactly. And that's why we look at these things. That's why I like looking into it. And I could play videos for a whole year on it, but I like to look at a little bit of here and there. We can revisit it. I just wanted to do something different tonight. Based on recent information, based on some biblical and religious text, based on Native American folklore. Who knows? We'll never fucking know. You guys know it. Unless you see one yourself and you get a picture of it. We'll never know. We'll never know, right? But I think we're going to go back to some political stuff tomorrow. I wanted to take a break from it. I wanted to look into some other stuff. I don't think shocks were created in a lab. If they were, it was done a long time ago. That's pretty fucking... I don't know where he came up with that shit. Yeah, right, Crispy? People... It gets weird working on the internet and doing these shows. It gets weird being me sometimes. It really does. Because I deal with all of it, you know? I don't know. I think that mental illness is running rampant in this country. I really do. That's another thing I learned as far as having this channel. I think mental illness is running rampant. I think a lot of people need help. I really do. I really do. The more I do these shows and some of the shit people come up with. And there's not much I wouldn't believe. But some of the shit. Like God likes human sacrifice. Come on, dude. I don't get it. I don't get it. And I don't think everyone's trolling. Not very many times I'm lost for words. And I'm kind of lost for words a little bit. After some of the comments towards the end of tonight's show. I don't know. It really is, Jet. It really is. It really, really is. It's hard to figure out what's real anymore. But it's fascinating at the same time. I find it fascinating. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Yeah, that's right, Crispy. And then you have but at the same respect, the Kandahar giant story, a military man came out and spoke on it. You can look it up. I don't know if he put his name out there and shit, but I've watched several different ones with the same alleged guy. And it makes me wonder. Crispy, you're a military man. Have you seen weird things in battle? Things you can't explain? There's a lot of stories of paranormal stuff happening during battles. I don't know if you actually, I assume you were in battle by the type of individual you are and how proud you are of your service. Have you seen anything paranormal or strange while doing duty? Right, Adam? It's really, really wild. I've never seen a giant, I'll tell you that much. Not that I can recall. But it seems like sometimes around places where bombs are dropped or wars happening, strange shit happens. You see tic tacs. Is it all a psyop? Is it just to make you think something else, or is something real going on? You got the soldier's account, then you got the dude's account whose family's from out there, and he had an uncle in the CIA. You built structures to hold certain entities, but haven't seen anything you could rationally explain. Thank you, Diane. What do you, can you go further into what you said? You built structures to hold certain entities. Are they human entities? Could you divulge more? Please like, share, subscribe. I will be right back. I'm going to use the restroom, and we're going to wrap this show up. We'll have a little 25-minute maybe amongst each other about what we went through tonight. Crispy, if you'd like to divulge, I'd love to hear it. If not, I understand. Don't feel like you have to. Well, there's accounts of them, though. There's been accounts of them. They're all allegedly, but they found a lot of skeletons, and some of them allegedly being large. We go down rabbit holes sometimes at Nate's Live Talk. We look into paranormal. We look into the things people don't like to look into. Please like, share, subscribe if you like diving down rabbit holes. You're in the right place. I will be right back. I got to use the restroom. I will play an audio clip while I am gone.
Welcome to Afghanistan, where the we're here. From tales of giants roaming rugged terrain to encounters at Observation Post Rock, where soldiers were